Good morning, members. Though the clock ahead of me doesn't quite say 10 o'clock, I understand that it is. I'd like to welcome everybody to obviously this formal meeting of the Flood and Water Management Scrutiny Committee today. I am, for those of you that don't know me, Robert Reid, and I'm the chairman of the committee, and Tom, our vice chair, is also in attendance. Jess has confirmed to me that streaming arrangements are in place, and can I remind you that the audio-visual feed of the formal public meeting is being broadcasted live via the County Council's website. And with this in mind, I'd like to welcome members of the public watching this live. As the meeting is being streamed in the usual way, I would like to remind you that your comments will remain accessible online and be reported by the media. Just as a formality, important one, health and safety, I'd like to begin with that announcement to say that there's no fire drill this morning planned, and in the event of a fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber by the rear doors and leave the building through the reception. Hello? Am I going too fast for the streaming? Okay. Online. Reasonable access online. So, if we have to leave the building, to meet in the car park at the front. Meeting etiquette, can I remind everybody? I'm sure everybody is fully aware, but just to say so, to ensure that mobiles, laptops and iPads are silent for the duration of the meeting, please. And can I also remind you that the hearing loop is particularly sensitive and does pick up what people are saying. Requests to speak today will be collected by our Vice Chairman, Councillor Tom Ashton, with me. When invited to speak, you should press the button on your microphone and leave it live, and then press it again when you finish the contribution. And so I'll rattle into the agenda because we've got a packed one today. Jess, have we got any apologies for absence or replacement councillors, please?
Good morning. So I haven't received any apologies today.
Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to have to leave at 12 o'clock, so I apologise for that, but okay. I've got to get to another meeting.
Okay,
sorry.
Right. That benchmarks where I should be going to then. Councillor Martin.
Sorry, I need to leave at 11:45.
Hey, come on.
Sorry.
Anybody going to tell me 11:30 in a minute? Okay, coming back to a serious note then, have we got any declarations of interest, please? No? I don't think so, have we? Okay, so could we move to the minutes of the previous meeting, which seemed a long time ago, on the 21st of November? Yes, Councillor Spratt.
Thank you, Chairman. I did, in fact, send my apologies to the previous meeting. I was on holiday.
Right.
I rang them through the Friday before.
Thank you.
And they weren't recorded.
Okay, we'll make a note of that.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay. Right. Can I have a proposer for the minutes then, please? Oh, thank you very much, Councillor Fleetwood. And seconded. Thank you very much, Councillor Haig. Or Councillor Andrew Haig. That's lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Announcements by the chairman. I suppose we better just make sure that we're all in agreement. Is there any dissenters from all in favour? Mike? You're in favour? Yeah, everybody's in favour. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so we'll record those as being correct and accurate in all seriousness. Announcements by the chairman, executive councillors and lead officers. As I've mentioned, we've got a full agenda today, and I'll ask officers to take their reports presented today as read, and only to summarise the key points unless there's anything in particular that we come across, and what support is required by the committee. Members are reminded of the importance of the questions and contributions that will allow for efficient and effective use of time allocated in a discussion. I'd like to take the opportunity to inform members that we have an organised workshop on the 26th of April, and the workshop is aimed at raising awareness over a series of themes and fall within the committee's remit. My goodness, we are going to be busy. These are going to include an overview of the Section 19 investigations, and I'm sure there'll be something mentioned about near misses as well. Management of service water flooding, management of coast, rivers and canals, groundwater management, management of the water company's assets, internal drainage board assets, emergency planning and response to incidents, and mapping of investment opportunities and partnership working. The workshop will be held here in the county offices and is by invitation, and will be shared with members of this committee for you to add your work schedules and confirm attendance. For further information, please liaise with our Scrutiny officer, Chiara. And before moving on, I'd like to request an update from the Environment Agency colleagues on the ongoing problems experienced in Boston, owed to the dead fish appearing in the River Witham. As promised, our last meeting in November was some time ago, and we have had a circulation from Peter Riley, which was forwarded a few weeks ago, and Morgan Ray is in a chamber with us today. Very warm welcome, Morgan, and over to you to give us an update. Thank you very much. I beg your pardon. Peter Riley, welcome.
Morning, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your report that you've sent in as well, so it's great to have you with us as well. I'm sure members are very appreciative of your attendance, particularly with the sensitive issues that continue in Boston. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so just a verbal update today on the issues, not just in Boston on the Witham, but also on the Ancombe, which suffers in a similar way. So the issues I'm going to cover are what I've described as critical mass funding, both expenditure and potential income. The boom issue and the boat issue, they're all just expanding on issues that have been raised in that briefing note. So the River Ancombe has also come into scope because it's suffering from exactly the same problems, and it's likely that the solutions that work on the Witham will be also applicable to the Ancombe. So the costs should be reduced rather than just focused on the Witham. We have a gentleman who's been in touch with us and has produced a 40-page report on the issues on the Ancombe. Very, very similar issues to the Witham down at Boston. Same source issues, duckweed and azolla, same issues with high temperatures and low flows. We've had 2 meetings as a group so far to address the issues down on the Witham. We have a third, which is organised for March the 10th, which just came through this morning. And I've invited that gentleman along, and Mr. Crampton, to come along to that to see if we can add his weight and that of other interested parties on the Ancombe to devising a solution for the Witham. That group consists of Boston Rowing Club, Boston Motor Yacht Club, the Canal and Rivers Trust, who really are leading on it down on the Witham. Other businesses reliant on the river down there, Boston Borough Council, and obviously the interested public down there. The funding issues, as I've described in the paper, there's no one body responsible for this. That's why all of these organisations that I've mentioned are involved, and indeed ourselves, the Environment Agency, are involved, and so we're trying to find a way forward where all can perhaps contribute. We have two issues. One is the funding, and then the other is what is the answer to the problem. Clearly, just allowing the weed to float out at the bottom would be ideal, but relies on more water than we've had last summer or the summer before, and we have to plan for the future where we are equally short of water. We don't have, none of the parties involved here own a piece of kit that will remove these types of weed from the river. We use weed boats, we use tracked excavators, long-reach tracked excavators, to remove weed that grows in channel, rooted in channel or rooted in the margins. But the azolla and the duckweed float free on the surface, and the plant just doesn't work so well for that at all. So we're looking to develop a solution there. We won't be the only part of the country or the only rivers suffering with this issue. So I've got contacts out across my organisation, the Environment Agency, to try and find out, does anyone already own a piece of, a floating boat or excavator that deals better with this weed than any of the kit that we've got locally at the moment. So the expenditure around there is a difficulty for the Environment Agency. Our funding comes for flood protection measures only. On the Witham, there is no flood risk increased by that weed. Certain places there are, but not down there. So difficult for us to fund it. There is clearly an issue, part of our remit being, as you mentioned in the introduction, both fish life and more particularly eels. Environmental incidents we classify in 4 different ways in increasing levels of severity from Cat 4 up to Cat 1. 100 fish or more dead is automatically a Cat 1 incident for us. A single eel or more dead is a Cat 1 incident for us. So what's been happening down on the Witham and on the Ancombe are both become Category 1 environmental incidents for us. That doesn't necessarily free up funding to allow us to do that, to do anything about that. But you can see that we're in an impossible position, that we can watch a situation developing, unable to do anything about it, and then it becomes a Cat 1 incident. So my approach to all of this is that we must find a solution. There's no point sitting on our hands, there's no point saying that the funding comes in the funding streams prevent us from developing a solution. We must find a solution. We don't yet know what it is. We don't yet know how it will be funded. There might be an issue around income. There might be an income stream that could come from this, that if this could be composted, this material could be removed and composted, for instance, there might be an income stream. We're working with Dyson Farms. I got involved with Dyson Farms because there's a Flood and Water Live event planned for July 5th and 6th of this year, an AIDA.
Okay, are we there at that, are we? Yes, okay, fine. Councillor Bunny, you wanted to come in? Thank you.
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. I appreciate that the Ancombe is being looked at from sort of Bishop Bridge upwards, but I am concerned, to be honest, for a much smaller river, the River Raise, which flows into the Ancombe, where we too have had problems with duckweed and low level of water, obviously not on the same scale as the bigger rivers, but the fish on that river have died off as far as that, well, they're not as many as they used to be, let's put it that way. And I'm just wondering what can be done, or if anything can be done to help that particular river, because I know at least 2 parishes which are looking towards their tourist industry, active leisure industry, where the low level of that river, with the consequences we're talking about, is just as just a problem as it is in Boston or elsewhere.
Thank you. As you say, the reason we're discussing the Witham at Boston is because of the pressure of public interest on it. Developing a solution there will obviously be something that we can then use in other areas. So I wasn't aware that it was impacted in the same way so much on the River Raise. I'll take that away and consult my colleagues on that.
Yeah, good, thank you on that, because I mean, particularly at Waddingham, they spend a lot of money from the parish to remove the weed, and there are some issues sometimes on and off, but I think it is important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think I don't see anybody else wishing to... Oh, I beg your pardon. Councillor Maxton?
Sorry, Chairman. Just before I do, could you tell us which point of the agenda we're on at the moment?
We are still on item 4 at the moment because we're receiving an update on the situation in Boston, which has been referred to as primarily at the very beginning by Public Protection. And one of the things I was eager to actually hear and learn was if any address was coming from your good self, Peter, in the smell that has been a problem to a lot of residents in Boston from the dead fish. I understand the benchmarking of how many cause a major incident, but obviously one of the things that's going to come back to us is going to be a reoccurrence if the water levels don't increase. And you know, we listen to funding of partners and sort of who's responsible for what, but the last thing we want is a situation reoccurring again this year round. And I thought maybe that might have been asked by one of our Boston members, but since it hasn't been, I thought I would just seek clarity from you if we could, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, clearly both dead fish and dead vegetation dying off creates that smell. And as you say, the aim is not to have the same situation developing again. There isn't an easy solution. There isn't one organisation that is responsible to correct this situation. That's why we're trying to work in partnership to pool our skills and our funding and ensure that it doesn't happen again. As I say, we don't have the solution and we don't have a clear funding stream at this point in time. I do expect us to be able to intervene in the summer coming so that we don't suffer in the same way.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Ashley Morris?
Yeah, the Boston councillor you were waiting for, I'm sure. I can certainly confirm with considerable clarity how absolutely awful it was for people all the way down the end of, or the London Road end, of where the Witham goes out into the Haven. I mean, it was appalling in the hot weather, and that's densely populated. Really is, because there's been a lot of really good development of riverside property. And we can't do that again. The only thing I'd like to ask is, what exactly did we do last time? Because all I saw was something that looked like a pedalo, sort of piddling about on the Maud Foster, cutting up a wee bit of weed. Now, I came up to Lincolnshire from Somerset. We used to have a lot to do with the Kennet Avon, which has a similar problem because it's a shallow canal and concrete lined in a lot of places, and therefore the water's warm, and duckweed and everything else seems to flourish. And they seem to do a brilliant job with bigger pedalos and used a lot more, and I can't imagine there's a vast expense. But last summer really didn't reassure anyone. There was this wee thing diddling about, and that seemed to be it. And then someone opened the sluice gates and washed it all down at low tide, and there it all was, lime green and dead fish. Wasn't brilliant. I wonder if you could shed any light on any of that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Yes, so the weed boat that you saw, as I said, is we use it for keeping the channel clear to allow flow through. So it deals with weed that is rooted in the bed or at the margins, and it can't cope with the floating azolla or duckweed. It doesn't collect. It doesn't collect that. That just flows through, flows around it, and moves on. So it does cost quite a lot of money, but it is pretty ineffective, if I'm perfectly honest, which is part of the problem that we've been sort of exploring with the Canal and Rivers Trust. The Canal and Rivers Trust there are the navigation authority, which might be the case, should be the case on the Kennet and Avon. I might catch up with you afterwards if I might and find out. Yeah. So as I said, the Canal Rivers Trust lead on the issue from dealing with the weed, but obviously we are here. I'm here representing the Environment Agency to speak up on our behalf and develop solutions on our behalf. It does impact to a degree on our infrastructure at the bottom end, and to a degree, the infrastructure we have down there, I won't say causes the problem, but exacerbates the problem. We have a safety boom that, across the river to prevent boats getting drawn down into the sluices at the bottom end, and that certainly traps the weed. And we're trying to find or explore a solution around that. Allowing opening the sluices and allowing the weed to flow out has been done in the past, but the difficulty we have is in particularly low flow times. Obviously, you lose a lot of water when you do that. Water is put into the River Witham. We pump water into the River Witham at public expense through the Trent, Witham and Combe water supply. So there's a pumped feed from the River Trent. So we're spending money to pump water in at the top, only to be under pressure to allow it to flow out at the bottom. You can understand the difficulty there, particularly at times of low flow. It's also the case that the design of the sluice down there, again, exacerbates the problem. Ideally, if it was an overshot sluice, if water went out over the top of the gates, it'd be easy to lower the gates a little. The weed floats on the top and it would flow straight out without much loss of water. They're not that design. They're undershot gates, so the entire gate has to come out of the water, and you lose terrific volumes of water. So, as I say, one thing after another sort of compounds the issue. The boom that we have down there is certainly seen by some of the locals as a primary problem in terms of holding back the weed, prevent it even getting to the sluices. And we have costed up a replacement safety boom. As yet, I don't know if we'll have the money for that. We'll be able to justify that. But it's in the order of £17,000 to buy a replacement sluice. It'd probably be the same again to install it. I continue to explore that. But it is an especially difficult issue, and as I say, one issue feeds onto another, feeds onto another, feeds onto another.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Austin, you wanted to come in? Briefly?
Well, also representing Boston, part of Boston, which is bounded, to be honest, every side is bounded by water, but mainly it is tidal. I have a small amount that backs onto the river just above the barrier, but the rest then will be the industrial estate, which follows all round from the barrier. But I had no comments at all, and I certainly would have done if, excuse me, if there had been any serious ones from the people who, as I first mentioned, back onto their gardens back onto the river, but because the Environment Agency has built up the bank so much higher now, I don't think that anything would have, any smells would have penetrated through there. So I have not had any comments, and similarly not from the industrial estate.
Thank you. Would you like to respond, Peter?
I don't think I really have anything to add to that.
Okay.
It's good that
We'll
the
just
public
follow
know
it through.
are impacted, but yeah.
Thank you very much. Vice Chairman would like to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask what is the role of the Canal and River Trust and their responsibilities in respect of the River Witham? Who is it their responsibility to maintain a right of navigation and access for navigation on the river? And is it any of their responsibility or duty in respect of water levels, or is that entirely Environment Agency bringing that water over from the Trent and maintaining those levels? The reason I ask is that I'm conscious that when the Witham Forth brings water out of the Witham to flush its system and raise oxygen levels and in the Witham Forth system, that they are charged for the abstraction of the water out of the Witham that obviously goes through the Grand Sluice for free. And I was just wondering if that was something that the if the Canals and Rivers Trust do have responsibilities around navigation, if that could be prevailed upon with them. And I mean, I understand more broadly the challenges of funding and priority that comes with all of this. And I understand, obviously, the challenges of and the expense of putting weed boats in and doing the necessary work. It simply given the scale, Councillor Ashley Morris rightly raised the Maud Foster. Obviously, the Witham is on a much bigger scale and a much bigger expense involved, simply in sheer volume of material to move. But I was just wondering at what point, in terms of biodiversity disaster, in terms of dead fish and everything else in that river, does it become the kind of priority that attracts the kind of funding needed to make sure that it doesn't happen again? I mean, I mentioned last time we discussed this here, that if this was a pollution incident that caused this amount of dead fish, it would be in all of the national newspapers, but since it is something which is occurring to an extent naturally, but organisations having a responsibility to do something about it, it doesn't quite seem to hit the same point on the scale. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you're absolutely right in what you say there. That if it were a pollution incident, it would be seen as potentially as an environmental crime. But as you say, it occurs somewhat or perhaps naturally, and therefore it doesn't fall into the same category. What we can do with that information, I'm not sure, but that is the case. That obviously there's nothing to explore. There's no one to pursue for a criminal offence, for instance. Your initial question about the Canal and Rivers Trust role, they are the navigation authority. So as you say, they are accountable for providing a right of navigation for river users, which is why they're the lead organisation in this, really, because one of the major impacts is on boat users and those businesses who are trying to use the river down there, and indeed the public who are trying to use the river down there. And the weed boat that was used last summer was their weed boat. It was their efforts to try and clear the weed. As I say, not with any great success with that particular piece of kit. The abstraction that you talk about is the Environment Agency, so that Trent Witham Ancombe water transfer scheme is run by the Environment Agency, so that's why once water is put in at the top to hold those level up for abstractors, as you mentioned, Witham Forth and landowners down there to maintain levels there. So there is. Those are the different roles, but of course they're not mutually exclusive. They're not totally exclusive of each other, in that river levels can't drop below a certain level without impacting navigation, even were it not to be an impact from an abstraction perspective, for instance. I think I've addressed the points you raised there, Tom. Like I said, I don't have an answer about what difference it makes that it's not a pollution incident, classically a pollution incident. It certainly doesn't allow access to the Environment Agency, for instance, for any additional funding to respond to that.
Thank you very much for that. I'd be very interested to know what the assuming studies are done on fish numbers in the River Witham, just what impact it had on those fish stocks for the length of the Witham, and how long it might take or has taken for those numbers to come back. I'm aware, following pollution incidents in the past in the River Witham, there's been considerable effort to restock the river. I'm just wondering what impact on fish numbers this incident has had, and how long the recovery phase is likely to be. And one thing, while I've got the microphone, Mr. Chairman, it might be prudent for us to have the Canals and Rivers Trust here at a future meeting to pick up on their responsibilities alongside those of the Environment Agency. But just those questions on fish stock from me, please.
All we have in terms of the impact on fish stocks is an estimate. We have no way of counting, collecting all those fish that were killed. It certainly runs into many, many thousands. So, as I say, all we have is an estimate on that by my colleagues. So I'm sorry, I can't offer any more on that. You're right that the river has been restocked in the past post-pollution incidents, you know, again at public expense. But the impact that we've got is an estimate. How long it might take to recover again would be an estimate. I can gain that information from colleagues in our fisheries teams.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm keen that we really ought to be moving on shortly. Councillor Fleetwood, you'd like to come in?
Thank you, Councillor Fleetwood. Yes, Pete, you've mentioned indeed that you prime the Witham further upstream to actually sluice it out, to actually push the water out at the bottom sometimes. What sort of costs are there attached to actually priming the river? If indeed it is necessary to flush the river out, it might also allow, rather than dredging the channel, if you could basically remove some of the mud and give it a fairly good sluice through on occasion, it might be a useful facility for actually enlarging the channel too. So what sort of costs are there? We talk in terms of moving water from the Trent. Presumably you take water from different locations. How much is that sort of cost?
So it's just from a single location and it's pumped through to Short Ferry. It's somewhere over £80,000 a year that we spend on that. It's not to sluice the river through, it's purely to maintain volumes in the River Witham for abstraction for farmers and other river users.
Thank you. So on the basis of £80,000 a year, that is not, in the big scheme of budgets, a very large number. Shouldn't more money be spent actually pushing more water into the system so that you could flush weed out, you could basically remove the issues around Boston, you could indeed scour the riverbed further upstream and take that mud further down?
The first problem is, of course, that we're not funded to do that. We're not funded to pump river water into the top of the Witham to sluice weed out at the bottom. As I said, as you know, my area is in flood risk management. There is no flood risk associated with this type of weed at this location. There are lots of other things that it impacts on, but it doesn't impact on flood risk. So we certainly couldn't use flood risk money to impact on that. And while £80,000 might not be a great amount of money in the scheme of things, it is the entirety of the budget for bringing water from the Trent over to the Witham.
And if I can just come back again, how actually is it pumped? Is it through diesel motors or is it through electrical pumping? Is there where does the energy cost come from? What sort of motors are they? Turbines are they?
I'll have to check that and let you know. I imagine they're primarily electric, but I know that we have some diesels, but I think the diesels are a backup. But I can check that for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Maxton?
Thank you. In terms of an administrative point, I'm making sense of this debate by looking at the email we received on the 24th of January, which has a document from the Environment Agency called River Witham Weed Growth. Would it be possible to add that, for Democratic Services, to add that to the agenda pack for anybody that was listening at home or wanting to make sense of the debate? But also within that pack, it refers to, it says, please find attached the Fen Drain Report, which, starting at page 48, further explains. I don't know where to find the Fen Drain Report. It wasn't attached.
Okay, well, we'll see that you're furnished with that. I know exactly the report that you're referring to, as I spoke to earlier, and see that you have that. Thank you very much. Okay, right, just one final plea. When we get to the next meeting, if there is any way that we could have some forward thinking, which we've been asking for if the eventuality of dead fish comes again and the smell is to Boston residents. That's what I need, and members need some further support as to how we're actually going to deal with the situation, and I'll leave that with you. Moving on now, our Executive Councillor's announcements. I understand that Colin Davey is going to be deputised. My goodness, Councillor Dye, you've been very busy just recently, so over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll keep my Colin's comments really short, just because I'm conscious of time. In November, the National Infrastructure Commission published their review on reducing the risk of surface water flooding. The focus of the report is on understanding the level of investment needed to improve flood risk infrastructure, with government having 6 to 12 months to respond to the report. The report focuses on understanding the level of investment in drainage infrastructure, particularly highlighting the growing risk in towns and cities, and it is suggested that £12 billion of investment between 2025 to 55 will reduce properties at risk by 60%, although these are of course indicative figures. Just moving on the 10th of January, DEFRA published their review into the implementation of Section 3 of the Flood and Water Management Act. This is widely seen as positive news, with the overarching recommendation that the government must act to implement Schedule 3 following some further work to define the practical details, and the government have accepted this recommendation, with Therese Kofi, who probably is the Secretary of State, I don't know, I'm losing track of them all, positively committing to a public consultation later this year and full implementation in 2024. Just purely for Councillor Bunny's benefit, as he's in the room, following on from the August 2022 flooding events, of course, there were severe storms in August 2022, which caused significant and widespread disruption across the county. A large number of Section 19 investigations were commenced, and it is pleasing to report that good progress has been made with these reports, with many now concluded in a timely manner so that recommendations coming out of the reports can be acted upon. The storm event last August saw an exceptional amount of rainfall in a very short space of time in several areas, overwhelmed and exceeded modern design standards for drainage systems, and as of course we're aware, Market Raisin was one of these areas that was badly affected, which resulted in a significant number of properties experiencing internal flooding. Following a town-wide Section 19 investigation, this determined that further information would be required in regard to the current capacity and conditions of the drainage assets within Market Raisin, and that the best approach would be to undertake a feasibility study and hydraulic flood risk modelling across the town to understand the flood risk to the properties. Over the coming weeks, surveying will be undertaken, as well as other data gathering activities across the town, which will all feed into overall feasibility and modelling works. Finally, just an update on the Development Fund. Following funding provisionally made available by the Executive as part of the Development Fund programme to address drainage and flooding issues in Lincolnshire, I can confirm that work continues to address some key issues in the county, and currently there is a programme of work for investigation, cleansing and repairs at 33 locations across the county, which will be delivered before the end of the current financial year. Many of these locations have formed part of the existing Section 19 investigation, so this work to address some of the recommendations will be carried out of those reports. And I will also, Chairman, circulate these comments, and there's a bit more detail as well, so members have a copy of that. And there's a little bit more about Market Raisin as well, Councillor Bunny, that I'll send shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dyer. I think you'd also be in that address remembering the issues in Spalding as well as we had in Market Deeping. Moving on, have any other lead officers got any announcements they wish to make? Chris? No? Nicola? Matthew? Okay, right. Time of the essence is becoming part of the order of the day. So let's move to item 5, the flood risk team update, and leading on from what we've heard about Section 19 investigations. The items within the agenda, pages 11 to 18. and provides an update for the committee on the recent work that the flood risk team, including information forwarded to us on current flood investigations. The report, thank you, will be given by Matthew Harrison, and the actions that we're seeking is to view the current list of completed and active flood investigations online at our Section 19 live link, which is available in the report on the agenda. Secondly, to inform Democratic Services Scrutiny Officer in advance if they wish to raise any further sites at the forthcoming committee meeting, and to note and comment as required on updates provided on the work from the flood risk team. So, over to you, Matthew. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everybody. If I may, I will take this item as read, just mindful of time, and just pick out a few pertinent points for you, and happy to take questions as always at the end. So the report does highlight the current situation with Section 19 investigations. You will be aware that the last time we met, we had a significant number generated from the August event that has been talked about in Councillor Dyer's update. I'm pleased to say that the weather has been rather kind to us since then, thankfully, which has given us a chance to catch up and take stock, really, following those events in August, although work does continue with the Section 19 investigations across the county. But we are starting to now see some clear recommendations coming out of some of those reports which are being acted upon. Just to pick up on a point that got raised at the last committee meeting, it's just to clarify that the online Section 19 reports that you are available to view through the link that's provided, that is updated on a daily basis at 7 p.m. each evening. So the reason I mention that is that if any of you are aware that there have been some severe rainfall or weather events that have occurred in your areas, anything that has been reported to us that we're made aware of that will generate an investigation will be uploaded onto the system by the end of that working day. So it is a live system that is continually updated. So the information is there and available for you. Obviously, if there are any further inquiries that come from that, please do get in touch with us directly in the Floods and Water team. But hopefully that system is a good and accurate, up-to-date record of what is happening. I also just provide a bit of an update on the near-miss data and just clarify some information around that and the work that has taken place recently to collate the near-miss data and what we use that for, and the types of reports that we receive in relation to near-miss. And there's some interesting comparisons with the number of near-miss data received compared to the number of Section 19s, for example, and you'll see we are talking about some very, very large numbers of instances that get reported as near misses. Just quickly moving on, if I may, just to update on some key projects that we have going on. The Greater Lincolnshire groundwater project that we've reported about to committee before, I'm pleased to say that our outline business case has been approved and we have received funding to commence those works. We have engaged consultants to look at modelling for the chalk and limestone groundwater models, and we're working with a number of partners and stakeholders and community engagement to look at a number of groundwater issues, not only the risks from flooding, but the benefits that this may bring to the environment, and also resilience to communities as well, so they can be better prepared. So this is a great piece of news that we've secured this funding to look into what is the least understood of the flood risk that we face in Lincolnshire with groundwater. So very much work in progress, and happy to bring further updates to this committee as the project develops. The riparian project as well, some good progress has been made with that, and you'll see in the report that we've had 4 parish or town councils approach us to be engaged with working with us to look at how we can better communicate riparian roles and responsibilities, and we have some forthcoming drop-in sessions and workshops with those 4 parishes, and we'll obviously take learning from that, working with them closely to see how that could perhaps be rolled out more widely in the county. And then finally, I will just conclude to confirm that the Long Bennington Flood Alleviation Scheme, We've had some good news as well with that the outline business case has been approved, and a lot of work is going into driving things forward to hopefully have that scheme now delivered during this summer. Tenders are currently out for that project. Design is underway and almost completed. And as I say, we are looking at being on site in May 2023 to deliver the Long Bennington Flood Alleviation Scheme, as was reported in full council on Friday of last week. And I will leave it there for now, Chairman, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's good that you've reconfirmed the discussion we had on Friday about Long Bennington. Okay, so are there any comments from members of the committee? Yes, Councillor Clark.
Chairman, just really on the terminology of the report. Page 12 says that recommendations, are these enforceable or is it goodwill? Page 13, where it says water is approaching the property, is that any distance from the property or is there a distance, you know, that covers that? And also on the sandbags, can people request these and who is it the responsibility to supply? Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. So the recommendations, no, they are not enforced. That is the goodwill of working together in partnership. That's what the Lincolnshire Flood Risk and Water Management Partnership has been set up to do. So we work collaboratively across risk management authorities to look at those recommendations and see how best they can be taken forward. Regarding the distances of the near miss that you refer to, no, there is no set distance to that. That is interpretation from the reports that we receive or are reported to us, whether that be via members of the public or whoever that may be. So there is no criteria for any set distances. And as regards sandbags, that comes down to something else that I'm currently working on with our district and emergency planning colleagues regarding a memorandum of understanding as to how we deal with that consistently across the county. That is something that has been brought previously to this committee, but there were some outstanding actions and they've been reviewed since the August flooding event to make sure that they are current and up to date. I'm currently working with our emergency planning colleagues and through the district liaison forum to try and get that sorted as soon as we possibly can amongst all district members so that we can have some consistency as to how that is dealt with across the county, and happy to bring that to a future meeting or as an update to let you know when that has been agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Taylor?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for those updates, Matthew. Good to hear that progress is taking place there. We've referred quite a bit to that trouble last August, which know the floods were very stressful and emotional for many people. It does take some time to recover. And that last comment there, and that comment there from Councillor Clark regarding availability of sandbags, I believe we do need to press on with that regarding prevention, because we know we operate the floodline number here from this council, and I understand the present advice is we do not advertise or promote a private business where they're available, which is also may be adding to the stress and frustration for residents, because it is a panic and they are looking to try and prevent it from happening again in the future. So that is an issue we do need to sort of press on with regarding district councils or parish councils, so we can press on that point regarding the prevention, so we can provide as much advice as possible through all our communication channels, because we know it's it's a distressing situation when it occurs once, but if residents and businesses can be prepared to look at how they can put in place policies or ways they can prevent it, it's going to ease that stress in the future. So we do need to provide that information on where sandbags and other advice can be received in good time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Councillor Fleetwood?
Yes, just continue along a similar line to Councillor Taylor. And you know how this is one of my beefs with regard to flooding and near misses. Could we, as a committee, arrange some sort of a portfolio of different devices that could be available to householders? I know that there are pressure locks you can put on toilets to stop sewage coming out of toilets. There are air brick covers. there's, okay, we talk in terms of sandbags, but once a sandbag's been used once, it's useless. There are gelatine bags effectively. Could we not put together a portfolio of devices that might be available to the public for them to purchase directly if they are in situations where they might have a localised issue, they might want to provide additional help to their own situations if they think they are in the situation of blight or flooding. It would help everybody. I'm not necessarily advocating the councils all buy these devices, but if we made the devices information available to the public, it might help so many people.
Thank you very much. To me, that I'd like to make a suggestion that perhaps that's actually added as an amendment to the Memorandum of Understanding between the 7 district councils, which I know Matthew's been working on. I've been very keen to get an agreement back to us of all 7 district councils, and I know that hasn't been concluded yet, but it seems to me that that would probably be the most appropriate place for that toolkit of advice, which is very sensibly asked Councillor Fleetwood to be added. Would you be comfortable with that action?
I would, Chairman, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Next, I beg your pardon, I think it was Councillor Brooks. I see Councillor Baxter wants to come in after that.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is about the Lincolnshire riparian project. I'm just wondering how long it will be before we get some report back on the outcomes from this project, because a lot of the flooding problems we seem to have do come down to riparian owners not taking responsibility for the water courses that they should be taking responsibility for. And I think this is an important bit of work, especially in the enforcement side of that. And I'm presuming drainage boards are involved in this project, because I think they've got a big part to play in that, and trying to enforce these people to take the responsibility they should do for clearing out their water courses. I just would like to know when we're due to get some feedback on that, of outcomes. Thank you.
Okay, Matthew, perhaps you'd like to note and give us some form of reply as to regards the feedback and sort of a timescale on it. It's very timely. I knew it would come up again today, riparian rights. It is something that collectively we must continue to talk about. We must continue to talk about landowners, and indeed those more neglectful landowners that don't actually help us with riparian rights and the flows and the knock-on problems that indeed we have from drainage boards. So over to you, Matthew.
Yes, thank you for that. More than happy. I think at the next meeting we could bring a more detailed paper on the riparian project, particularly in recent weeks and the last few months. We've had a number of developments with the project as highlighted in the report. For example, the development of the enforcement document for best practice and the national community of best practice, as well as the current engagement work that we have with the parish and town councils. I think when we set out on looking into riparian roles and responsibilities, it was initially to have that as sort of an education, awareness raising, and the more we looked into it, the more complex and detailed it got with all of the different strands that are linked into riparian roles and responsibilities. So it has turned into quite a large project with a number of different strands, but quite rightly, I think we should be looking into all of this in the detail that we are. So I think because of the developments that we've had recently and how some things have moved on, more than happy to bring a more detailed report on it and its own right to a future meeting, or to the next meeting indeed, if you would like that. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much for that. So can I sort of interpret from that then that perhaps within the report we might get to learn how many riparian enforcement actions have actually happened, because I think that would give us a steer if it's attainable and indeed across the district as well, so as we can see sort of what activity across our counties are actually happening. Is that possible?
Yes, it is. As members will be aware, we have a memorandum of understanding with internal drainage boards in the county, so we've got full county-wide coverage for consenting and enforcement cases, so that the IDBs carry that out on our behalf outside of their board areas and the extended areas. So yes, that's information that we can pull together as part of this project as well through our IDB colleagues, so we'll be able to bring that forward for a future meeting.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Maxley, you wanted to come in?
Thank you. I just wanted to, for the record, express my gratitude to Mr Harrison for the correspondence we've had about and conversations we've had about the flooding on High Street Market Deeping. I can't see it mentioned anywhere in the report specifically, but there is an ongoing Section 19 investigation into the flooding on High Street Market Deeping, and I understand the report is in draft form. I'm not sure when the draft report will become a publishable report, but I look forward to it with anticipation. Thank you.
I'm sure Councillor Baxter, it's not just with anticipation, it's also with some clarity, because flooding situations in all of our areas are very dear to us and are really a great problem, and it's what we do as councillors to try and see that through the agencies they coordinate together and alleviate these things actually happening. Right, so, I beg your pardon? Oh, right, Vice Chairman next, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just picking up on the riparian project, and these I appreciate are more comments than questions. Really, really good to see this progressing and doing the best we can with a difficult regulatory background that underpins all of this. I feel that we will never perhaps get to where we really want to be with ensuring that riparian owners take full responsibility for drainage until such time as a country we take the same responsibility for drainage as our colleagues over in the Netherlands do, and properly empower those authorities, not so much empower, but properly finance those authorities that are empowered to do enforcement, to do it to the standard that is absolutely necessary. It is something that runs through so much of what we do around enforcement, be it the Environment Agency in enforcing on pollution, whether it is drainage boards and other risk management authorities, trying to give protection from flooding. We don't have the ability to do cost recovery on enforcement. We have the powers to do enforcement, but we don't have the financial structures that really back it up and really make it work, because it's only by doing so will landowners take serious responsibility for the ditch that they have neglected for the last 40 years, or the homeowners that have filled in the ditch between themselves and the road and are now complaining why their gardens flood. And until as a country we take that level of responsibility and are prepared to back those organisations that are genuinely doing their best, this authority and others through the Greater Lincolnshire Partnership, to really put some teeth into this, then we will always be, we can only do what we can do with the powers that we've got, but it is, to my mind, a national priority that there should be more.
Okay, thank you for that. I think in listening and fully supporting what you're actually saying, I'm also mindful that right across the county and Parliament and politically as well, what we really need is further encouragement for the Environment Agency and its budgets to be able to undertake a greater sort of stance on that, but I'm sure Morgan will come on to that when we get there. So, Councillor Bunny, did you, last speaker? Yeah?
Thank you. Just very quickly, and I'd like to recognise also the work that's been done for us in Market Raiser on behalf of the various agencies. As we heard from Councillor Taylor, flooding is an emotional situation for those who are affected, and also those who feel they're about to be affected, and it does cause a lot of concern. It isn't easy, but so many different agencies seem to be involved with the problem or the various problems that are making up the issue. I can think of one area of Market Raisin where I think there are probably 3 problems creating the same amount of floodwater, which needs to be dealt with. And getting that joint involvement of all the agencies to actually sit down and work together, I find lacking in a way. I'm not saying that people aren't doing their job, but because they are, but it's always sometimes, oh, well, we'll have to consult somebody else, and that adds to the time. And I think gives people the perception that really the professionals aren't aware of the issue, and I don't think that's a fair comment, but that's the way it comes across. So I would welcome that when there is a major flooding incident like we had in Market Raisin, both in August and in November actually, and elsewhere, that in fact we do have a mechanism where we can all sit down together and actually be aware of what's going on. And I find that as a council would be useful. I can understand sometimes it might not want to be an area of casting blame, but what we do need to do is be making sure that we're working forward for the good of the public. And really, it's be much easier if we could do it around one table than 4, 5, 6 different ones.
Okay, first of all, I think I've mentioned again today, and I've done throughout the whole of my chairmanship, is the memorandum of understanding between the districts and indeed the county, and the coordination that is really needed to sort of move forward where these unfortunate flooding incidents occur. I don't think any day, even now, the one we had, Thurl being born in December 19, when it was exactly the same. I think, I hope members would appreciate, and I hope that the previous chairman, Councillor Skinner, and indeed through my chairmanship, has really enjoyed the joined up approach, in particular that Anglian Water, the Environment Agency and Matthew have particularly worked together and continue to do so, and whereby which you, I think, use the phrase, it might not be fair. I hope that you know, the good work and the good communication there will bestow the way forward of exactly what you're asking for. So if I could move forward now, please, to a proposal that I move that the committee receives the report that we have viewed and been informed on ongoing 19 cases, which indeed we have, and the opportunity to discuss these, and we offer our comments and recommendations to the overall effects of the flood team. So I request that our comments are captured and are taken into further consideration by the leading officers and relevant portfolio holders. And indeed, we perhaps a particularly mindful scrutiny officer that the riparian enforcement rights are noted, and that in particular, at this particular time, that market deeping gets a response as soon as possible for your things. So can I make that proposal? And indeed, we have heard again on how we're bringing near misses more into sort of the criteria of looking at what's happening across the council, across the county. So would we all endorse that? Is everybody happy to agree? Yes, Councillor Lucy Hayes. Yes, you're happy to propose that. And second? Thank you, Councillor Fleetwood. So are we all in favour? Happy with that? Thank you very much indeed. No dissenters, so that is carried. Okay, right. So let's move on to item 6, if we may. Alongside Morgan Ray, we have Stephanie Lyons from the Flood and Coastal Risk Management Advisory Partnerships and Strategic Overview for Lincolnshire online with a slide to present, which Jess will do for us. So I guess it's over to you, Morgan, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll give a very brief sort of update on my report, then I'll hand over to Stephanie, who will go through some of the work we're doing on the River Slee and Sleaford. So just to pick out a few highlights. So the Saltfleet to Gibraltar Point Beach Management Scheme is again provisionally scheduled for commencement in May this year. As well as that work, we're currently costing some additional works for approval, including some outfall repairs at various locations and the Chapel Penstock repair as well. A bit of an update on Wainfleet. I know you always want to interested in that. There's quite a lot of work going on behind the scenes with Wainfleet at the moment. We're just in the process of completing a large piece of work to do some modelling work, which will really help us to manage the watercourse in the future, and also help us to improve the flood warning system, as well as help with future strategic planning as well. So that work is underway. In fact, we presented some of that work to the steering group last week. The natural flood management is also underway at the moment as well. We're hopefully just starting that work at the moment. That's to carry out some natural flood risk management measures on the upstream catchment, on the steeping catchment, to complete that work by the end of this financial year. Again, and then looking towards the next financial year to carry on with that work as well. We're also looking at a public drop-in session, hopefully in the next few weeks, sometime during the spring, to update the community on the work that's progressing in Wainfleet. The Boston Barrier works. Our latest construction programme shows that the work around the wet dock, we're looking to complete all the works as a whole during 2024. So by the end of the financial year 23-24. Once finished, that work will contribute another 524 properties to the 14,256 that we've already reduced the risk of flooding for in Boston. The Lower Witham flood resilience work, we gave a previous presentation around. We've been doing a lot of work with our IDB and other risk management authority colleagues around the benefit apportionment work around that. So the system has to work as a whole with all the other risk management authorities. So really sort of starting to show partnership working around the management of the Lower Witham. So it's important that we apportion the benefits to different assets so that they can be funded in the future. We've also undertaken multiple farm visits to help understand better the value of farmland in the area, so that can be fed into the economics. We completed a slightly different matter on FloodX. So this was the big exercise that was undertaken in November. That was the 14th to the 18th of November, so a total of 20 local resilience forums across the country took part in that, so a very big exercise. And for us, we were looking at a combined East Coast and River Trent tidal flood scenario, and it was Lincolnshire LRF's major exercise for the year, so it gave us a really good opportunity to train our officers and to work with other partners, multi-agency partners involved with that. So it was largely involved with a sort of a large-scale evacuation of the East Coast communities and how we would deal with that. There's been good examples of work with the PSCA throughout. Several projects are undertaken by internal drainage boards using the public sector cooperation agreement. So I've included a couple of examples there by Black Sluice Internal Drainage Board, so work in the Heckington area and on the KIMO. So that is me. I'll just take any questions on that before I hand over to Stephanie.
Yes, that would be. Any members got any questions at this point before we? Yes, Councillor Austin.
Right, I'm getting a bit lost because. Do you think next time, please, we could have all the reports in one go instead of here, there and everywhere? It is absolute nightmare trying to collate everything. I heard your reference a moment ago to the Boston Barrier, which is essentially complete. I do have a few questions, though, in relation to it. Is this appropriate to ask them now?
I'm happy with that, yes.
Right.
If I can answer them, yes.
Right, well, if you can't answer them, could you please find the answers and then let me know? I don't mind whether it's a county councillor or a borough councillor, because it's my patch in either case. Right, first of all, when is the Macmillan Way footpath along the bank from Boston going to be reopened, please?
I'll take that one away with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And in relation to that, when are the interpretation boards that should be on the bank near the barrier going to be viewable? I don't think they've happened yet.
I'll take that one away as well.
This is you know, stuff that should have been done a long time ago. Thirdly, when is the damaged wall over the lock tunnel on London Road going to be repaired, please? We've just got temporary barriers. This really is unacceptable.
Noted, thank you.
Right. The fourth one, if all in relation, to the same thing really, has the EA actually agreed the boundary of their land with the property owners along Wiberton Low Road and what access will be required by the EA for maintenance purposes? Because at the moment people think their gardens go so far and the Environment Agency thinks they go somewhere else. That's got to be agreed, please. Right, well, all of that really is all relating to the barrier project, but if it's finished, then these matters want dealing with, please.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll take those points away and I'll take them up with the project director and hopefully get you an answer as soon as possible.
But otherwise, the actual project itself, that's great, but it's these ancillary things that just need tidying up now. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Austin. So it's good to hear of your approval of the great scheme with these 4 amendments. Perhaps when you can come back with those responses, Morgan, you might copy me in so as we can monitor through Kiara that they are there and minuted. Now then, Vice Chairman, I understand you'd like to come in. Councillor Austin, you've still got your microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to pick up very briefly on the LRF update on page 12. Really good to see the outcomes of the last FloodX coming through. I'm very pleased to be a part of that meeting, of that exercise. And I won't repeat all of the comment that I said last time, other than to reiterate that the cost of preventing a flood, a East Coast disaster, will always be infinitely cheaper than trying to clear up after it, notwithstanding the massive social impacts that would also arise. But my reason for mentioning on the LRF is I understand that planning is underway for the 2023 exercise, which, as I understand it, is based around massive power outages alongside heavy rainfall events and so on. Something I would be very keen to see if it could be factored in to that exercise is that across Lincolnshire there are numerous second line pumping defences that we have, diesel pumping stations that have mostly been superseded for day-to-day operations by electric pumps, but those diesel pumps are still there and almost university maintained in an operating condition. And I think it would be really useful as part of that that exercise that's due to take place in 2023 to have a proper Lincolnshire-wide understanding of where those pumps are, what condition they are in, how many hours they could run, and what impact that would have if the light genuinely went out for a long period during a heavy rainfall event. And I know there's often criticism that these are ancient bits of kit, but frankly, when the power's out and the water's coming up, a 1930s bit of kit will shift a lot more water than you or I can with a bucket. So if we could, and I think it's important to know where they are, what they need to be, if they need anything to be operational, and what impact that they would have in that kind of scenario, because I think it could make a significant difference in the location where they exist. Thank you.
Thank you. Just as a response to that, yeah, I mean, it will be an interesting exercise. As the national power outage is a huge sort of LRF exercise. Certainly something we'll be using to test our contingency plans for all our major assets. So yeah, we'll wait to see how that unfolds. But I'll see that if there's a way of feeding those comments back into the sort of the incident planning.
Yeah, okay, it'd be good. And of course it'll include the drainage board's participations, won't it, to be able to coordinate that. Okay, right, are we ready, Jess, to let Stephanie Lyons do a presentation for us? Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I'll just introduce Stephanie. So Stephanie,
absolutely. Thank you very much.
Stephanie works in our Partnerships and Strategic Overview team.
Yeah.
She's our senior user for the Sleaford Flood Alleviation Scheme. So she's been working on that day to day. So we thought it'd be quite good to come along and give the committee a little bit of a more in-depth look at one of our projects we're hoping to achieve.
Thank you very much.
So hopefully Steph will be online.
Yes.
Thank
Hi
you.
there. Thanks, Morgan. Thanks, Chair. Yes, so I was going to give you a very quick summary of the flood resilience project we have on the River Slee in Sleaford. Could you just move on to the next slide, please? Great, thank you. Sorry, I'm unaware of the setup there, so please let me know if you need me to slow down. And sorry, I can't be with you in person today. So the River Slee Flood Resilience Project is centred around Sleaford in Lincolnshire. The rivers we're looking at are the River Slee, the Old Slee, and the 9 Foot. So this image here, the map in there has a star up and down stream of the extent of the project, and some photos around to show the kind of current state of assets within the River Slee. So we are focusing on EA operated assets. The rivers in Sleaford have had a range of historic uses, including milling and navigation, which has resulted in a number of historic structures in the watercourse today. The rivers are predominantly groundwater fed and today suffer with both high and low flows. So you can see in the bottom left photo the wetted channel and the dry channel. So the image to the left is taken in May 2022 and the image to the right was taken in August 2022. So there are quite, it goes up and down quite significantly. In the dry months when groundwater levels are low, we actually have a borehole to try and supplement supply to keep the river flowing. The structures in the watercourse today actually hold up and retain water levels predominantly for aesthetic purposes. However, our flood risk modelling shows that these also cause a flood risk by causing an obstruction. The structures are also incredibly intensive to operate during a flood, and we need our field ops teams to go out and manually manage levels and alter the structures. Many of these structures are at or nearing the end of their design life and need replacement. So this project is looking at the catchment as a whole and trying to find a more sustainable way forward. This means we are considering costs, operation, flood risk and wider benefits we might be able to bring. The River Slee Flood Resilience Project is looking at replacing ageing assets in the town and finding a more sustainable way of managing the catchment. So far, we've held 2 workshops with key stakeholders regarding the works that are undertaken in the area. We also wanted to find out, understand their priorities and understand their views on potential measures. We've also sent out newsletters and have a website update due shortly. Through all of this, we've enhanced our understanding of the current flood risk and wider environmental constraints and opportunities, and we're currently reviewing the flood risk modelling, and we've just submitted our strategic outline case to the LPRG, which is currently going through appraisal. So that's very quick run through the project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. Can I invite, thank you very much, Stephanie. Yes, Councillor Haig, Andrew.
Thank you, Chairman. Could we ask Stephanie if we could make those slides available to the committee, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure we can. I had a little bit of a job with the finity of the map of actually being able to find a definitive there, but I did get it, and I think it's very worthwhile, to be fair. Thank you. Councillor Fleetwood?
Yes, thank you. This is a conversation I was having with one of my relatives a couple of days ago, curiously enough, Riverslea. As you know, I'm probably more concerned with carpets and people with regard to flooding. But curiously, I want to talk about the birds and the bees. Effectively, if you have a riverbed that dries up, you end up with trapped water at different locations. And with regard to ecology, what happens to the fish and all the other wildlife that's in the channel? Do they die? Do they get lost in different directions? What would actually happen if you don't keep any base water in the channel?
Yeah, I fully sympathise. I mean, it doesn't just, with all fairness, happen here with climate change. They have similar situations in Australia, which are equally as sort of upsetting, particularly with fish and whatever when the water dries up, and you know there's sort of only a real sparsity left in various places. Morgan, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, well, of course, that's why we have the augmentation flow, and I think obviously a lot of the business case around that originally was around keeping that flow in for biodiversity purposes in the summer months or when the river is a low flow. I don't know if Steph's got anything else to add onto that, whether there's any sort of background that you've come across in terms of fish rescues or anything like that, which adds into the business case.
Steph?
I'm afraid I can't add much at the moment, but I'm sure we can ask our colleagues if more information is needed. But I can assure you that we are talking to colleagues in the kind of fisheries area and ecologists to make sure all of this is accounted for when we are looking at various measures that we could put in place.
Okay, so really this is the other end of flooding, isn't it, really? It's the area where, again, we need the help and the coordination of our agencies in, and particularly with our drainage boards, in actually making water available to sort of keep things flowing as it goes. Councillor Fleetwood?
Well, just coming back, I can remember a few years back as a child standing in Sleaford, looking into the river course and watching trout and such things in the water course. If I go to the Bain, the River Bain, you used to be able to go to Hubbard's Hills and you'd see trout in the Bain. All of these species have now disappeared. So something has changed quite dramatically over time. The clue, I think, is in the name at Sleaford, the River Slee and a ford. Well, curious enough, you drive through a ford. So I think it's traditionally been a wettish area, question mark. Why have we suddenly got to a stage when the world is becoming a wetter place where the channel is drying up so much?
Okay, I think what I'd like to do with that is actually suggest that we include that in a proposal that at the next meeting we have some update on drought water management, because you are absolutely right, nature is very, very important. Fishing and all the other nature aspects, as well as the flow of our water and indeed irrigation for farmers as well. Vice Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that was very useful. My questions and queries were around just picking up on movable structures maintain a water level for aesthetic reasons. Are we looking at something which is in potential conflict with the potential navigation restoration with the Schley navigation, or are these things that might be able to be worked hand in hand, appreciating obviously that the navigation requirements of the Schley always required the holding of water back for that purpose, and perhaps that might have an opportunity here of cracking the two things at the same time. I mean, if it were possible to provide a healthy environment for fish in the River Schley, if I'm allowed to be a little bit flippant, I'd rather, if I were a fish, stay in the Schley than fancy my chances in the Witham at the moment. But if you could just comment on whether it is possible, or whether we envisage it being possible, being able to restore the Schley navigation for aesthetic and indeed tourist boating purposes, as well as being able to maintain the water levels for the benefit of fish and eels, etc.
Morgan, shall we add that to what we're going to do for the report for next time? Would that be
Yeah,
a proactive statement?
Just very briefly, we have one of our stakeholders who we consulted is the Schley Navigation Trust, I think it is. So we've had extensive stakeholder network events with all the different stakeholders, and they're very much part of that and have joined in quite considerably. Just while I've got the floor, very briefly, just on drought, yeah, very happy to come along and invite the appropriate speakers to talk about the water situation. But very briefly, I think within the last month, we've officially come out of the sort of drought status. So I think we had around about 150% of the long-term average rainfall in November and December, which has put us in a better position. Obviously, the groundwater levels are still low, so we have to watch things very closely over the coming months.
Well, I think that's very comforting that somewhere along the line, the defiance of climate change and thankfulness to the Lord that our water levels have come up, because they've been a real great concern to us all. Vice Chairman?
Just very briefly, if this is coming back in some detail, appreciating that not all members will enjoy a familiarity with the River Schley and Sleaford and different locations on this map, would there be any scope prior to a future meeting of perhaps going and having a look as part of a committee site visit? We haven't had one since we did Wainfleet, I think possibly pre-pandemic, but I'm happy to be guided, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm sure you'll be happy to be guided. So I think we need to make sure that each of the items that come up that we address proactively. So we've got a workshop itinerary, which is quite exhaustive, to be fair. I think if we were to then to suggest that that forms the way forward as the next thing to do, which might, not wishing to move it on, but might be in the chairmanship of somebody other than myself, I think would be a very good idea. So, Cara, can we make particular note of that? Right, thank you very much, Stephanie. If I could move that we receive the updates from the Environment Agency, and that we're satisfied with the progress of works that have been undertaken in Lincolnshire reported. And of course, we've had today's comments and debate, which we've got minuted, and are forwarded to obviously to Morgan and his team, the Environment Agency representatives, and interested parties. Are we all in favour and comfortable with that? Can I ask, please? Any dissenters? No? Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Well, then that's agreed. Okay, so I'd like to move on next, if I may, to Angling Waters update. Thank you very much, Jonathan. I understand that there is supporting a report that came to us over the weekend, and we look forward to your presentation. Thank you very much. Oh, I beg your pardon.
Point of order, it does say on the agenda that the report is to follow, but I haven't seen it.
Did make point of...
Yeah, there is no report, it's just a presentation, which I'll run through now.
It's just a presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Okay, right. Okay, can we move on then with the presentation? Thank you.
So hopefully this will work. You can jump on a couple, please, Jess. So I just wanted to give a bit of background. So apologies for those of you that might have heard some of this before, but I think it's useful just to remind the committee of, I suppose, who we are and what we do. Next slide, please. So we are the largest water company geographically in England and Wales. So you can see it cover a huge area from the Humber to the Thames and from the East Coast all the way across to kind of Leicestershire, Northamptonshire. So a big area that we cover. And you can see some of the kind of sort of facts and figures there. I won't go through them all. I suppose the most pertinent ones for this committee are probably right at the bottom there in terms of the, I suppose, sewers and our water recycling assets. That is a quarter of all the pumping stations and water recycling centres in the country that we are responsible for. So it gives you an idea of the kind of scale of assets that we manage. And if I can just have the next slide, please, Jess. If you look at, in particular, the length of sewers, that would take you around the world twice, around the equator twice, or a quarter of the way to the moon. So it gives you kind of a bit of context of the kind of sheer length of assets that we manage and that we're responsible for. So next slide, please. So and as you all know very well in Lincolnshire, it's a particularly vulnerable part of the country. So particularly vulnerable to a changing climate. So, we've talked a little bit there, Chair, about drought and the risk of dry summers. And I'm happy to also talk to my colleagues about coming along to support that discussion at the next meeting. So, and I think this is where, a joined-up approach is critical, and this is why the groundwater project is so useful, actually, that we're exploring at the moment. If we take Bourne as a good example, we're under huge amount of pressure to reduce our abstraction, but we've got people who are kind of flooding in Bourne at the moment. So if we reduce our abstraction even more, that's only going to get worse. It's the problem with groundwater is once you stop taking and abstracting it, it's going to go somewhere else. So we need to kind of make sure we look at both sides of that coin, and that's why the groundwater project is so important as part of that. So, but no, we'll certainly support that debate coming forward. But I suppose more relevant to this committee, we are, it is a particularly dry part of the region, but we are particularly vulnerable to those kind of extreme events like we saw last August. The warmer air across the east does result in those more kind of intense storms. So we do see them fairly regularly across the region. I was looking last night as well. So we have a very long coastline. If you stretch out all our coastline, that would take us from Lincoln all the way to the south of France. So, and we have a lot of assets along that coastline as well. So, a piece of work I'm looking at the moment is looking at the vulnerability of our assets to flooding, particularly coastal surges and other sources of flood risk, and how we can kind of look to protect those. So, so some big challenges there. So, next slide, please, Jess. And so, this slide, very busy slide, so I won't go through it in detail, but the key point here, I suppose two key points here. One is that we are now a purpose-driven organisation. You might have heard a lot about kind of purpose-driven organisations in the press recently, and you can see our purpose at the top there, to bring environmental and social prosperity to the region we serve. That is embedded in our Articles of Association, so our legal document allows us to act as the water company in this region. That purpose is now embedded within that. We were the first water company to take this kind of purpose-driven approach. And the other key point on here is just this kind of, I suppose, strategic approach to long-term planning that we take. So we've been doing it for a very, very long time from a water resources perspective, so a water resources management plan, and we're now doing it from a water recycling or a wastewater perspective, so the drainage and wastewater management plan. So that also aligns with our water industry natural environment program. So that's the water quality element of the work that we do. So all the pollution stuff that you will have seen in the press recently. This current 5-year investment period, we're investing nearly £1 billion to improve water quality, and that's only going to get bigger over the next kind of 5 to 10 years. So already investing a huge amount of money in this space, and again, that is the largest of any water company, significantly larger than any other water company on our Win Up plan this current 5 years. So. And we're also challenging ourselves to get to net zero by 2030. So, so all of that, encompassed with a big kind of, doing the right thing in terms of a changing climate. And just jump on to the next slide, please, Jess. Again, really busy, and you can see these after and read through the detail, but I wanted to pick up a few key points in this slide. So if you look at the bullet point on the top left, so industry leader in partnership working. So we have been at the forefront of working together with other organisations to manage flood risk since I joined the business over a decade ago. So, and we're very proud of that, and picking up on the point Councillor Bunny was making earlier about working together, and Chair, you picked up on it. I think we're actually very, very good at what we do, particularly across Lincolnshire, in terms of the work we do collaboratively to reduce flood risk. I know it doesn't happen everywhere, and I think the relationship that Matthew and I have, and our colleagues and our kind of operational teams, as well as alongside Morgan and the Environment Agency and the drainage boards, I think is excellent. And we have continued to kind of build on that throughout the kind of I've split that down into kind of AMP periods. Those are our kind of investment cycles, but that's really the kind of last 10 years. I think we've really been at the forefront of this. The second thing I wanted just to touch on there, right in the middle of the slide, deliver 92 flooding partnership schemes. So in this current 5-year investment period, we have a performance commitment from our regulator to deliver 92 schemes in partnership with other organisations. We're doing a big chunk of those with Lincolnshire County Councils. So again, I think it just shows that actually we have a fantastic working relationship here that really drives that forward. And just picking up on some of the things that Matthew was talking about earlier, we're co-funding the Long Bennington work as an example, and we're also looking to do some work in Sturton by Stow, which was on your list of riparian issues, by funding the National Flood Forum to come in and support that work. So there's lots of different ways that we can be involved in this work, but I think it's really, really positive what we do. And again, we try and build on that and do even more over the next 5-year kind of investment period. So just on that kind of riparian issue as well, I know it's been picked up here and is clearly an important issue. We saw similar issues when we had the really wet winter 1 or 2 winters ago, when similar issues across Norfolk where lots of riparian issues. There was nowhere for that water to go, so it just ended up in the sewer system because that was the kind of lowest point. The manholes just acted like plug holes, and it had all sorts of problems for our customers. So we've done a huge work there, kind of locally with our operational teams. But what we've decided to do, and I hope we get support for this, is going forward into our next investment period is put a little bit of money aside so that we can maybe pump prime some of that local work with riparian owners to help them, do the right thing. Often it's get a digger in and clear out the ditches or whatever. They can often do that far better at a kind of local parish level than we could ever do trying to do stuff. So we've got to hopefully have a little bit of funding to support that work there. Even if it's just 500 quid or £1,000, just to say, well, look, go and do it. We'll support you with a little bit of funding and get, and then continue that work because we can see the benefit because it doesn't then impact on our assets and then our customers downstream. So really, really important, some of the stuff we're doing. So next slide, please. So I just wanted to then just kind of give a bit of flavour for some of the numbers across Lincolnshire. So what our operational teams have to do on a kind of yearly basis. So next slide, please, Jess. So we have about 10. So this is for Greater Lincolnshire. So this covers Lincolnshire County Council and the 2 unitaries, North and North East Lincolnshire. So that's just the way our operational kind of areas are split. But obviously the bulk of these jobs will be across Lincolnshire. So over 10,000 separate jobs raised, either by ourselves internally or by customers every single year across Greater Lincolnshire. 2,000 external floodings, 100 internal floodings, and a large number of loss of facilities. Now, I was interested in looking at this. So the bulk of our floodings, about 80% of our floodings are caused by blockages. And there'll be some double counting in those figures, so don't try and add them all up because it won't work. But yeah, so about 80% of our flooding numbers are caused by blockages. So if you take 80% away from, say, the near misses that you were looking at earlier, Matthew, so those 2,000 external floodings, that leaves us with about 400 external floodings caused by kind of heavy rain, which pretty much aligns beautifully with the numbers that you also have as well. And I was looking at your definition of kind of near misses, and that aligns almost exactly the same as our definition for external flooding. So, and we share our data on floodings with the county on a bi-weekly or bi-monthly basis. So those kind of near misses and external floodings should be aligning in places so that we're seeing some of that stuff. and I'm sure I've said this before, but you are the only county or the only lead local flood authority that looks at near misses and external floodings. Nobody else does that. And I think that's excellent what you do, because we've had to look at external floodings for years, and it goes back to the joint working point that if you're looking at near misses and we're looking at near misses too, we can then look at where there's those opportunities to work together to reduce that likelihood of that happening again in the future. And the other key point here is just around our kind of proactive planned maintenance work that we do. So we do a lot of jobs to kind of proactively reduce the likelihood of either flooding or pollution happening where we know we get kind of repeat blockages. So repeat offenders almost, we will target those, hit those hard with maintenance to make sure we don't get pictures like you see in the image there. So, and I was looking at that image in a bit of detail last night, and I'm sure I can see rubber gloves. I think there's an apple in the front. All sorts of things end up getting put down the drain that shouldn't be there, along with hundreds of thousands of wet wipes and lots of fat. So, you know, we say it all the time, if you're ever speaking to your constituents, please encourage them to put the right things down the drain and bin the other things that shouldn't be going down the drain, because often these are avoidable blockages that actually cause a lot of the problems for our customers and a lot of the pollution that impacts on the environment. So, and then last couple of slides, please, Jess. Yeah, just a quick update on business planning. So at the last committee meeting, I talked about where we're looking and exploring opportunities from both a water quality perspective and a flood risk perspective. That work continues. My colleague Matthew is I know engaged with you, Matthew, about looking at opportunities to work together. We will continue those discussions going forward. It's really, really important that we get the kind of support and buy-in from our kind of lead local flood authorities across the region when we eventually put our business plan to our regulator. If we don't have the support from yourselves to say, yes, we support this, yes, we back it up with our own funding, and we can look at where there's those joint benefits, then we won't get the funding to support the work that you and we want to do across Lincolnshire for the communities that we all serve. So really, really, again, thank you, Matthew, for your support, and we will continue to work together as best as we can going forward. So I'll leave it there. I'm very, very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Just before moving to questions, is there any update on the SPA pipeline?
Oh, yes.
Because
yes,
I know I am, but we all get asked lots of questions about it, so it'd be really good. Thank you.
Yeah, there is. Sorry, I forgot. I've got some notes on that. So just on that, so for those of you that aren't aware, so SPA is our Strategic Pipeline Alliance. So that's the new strategic pipeline that will allow us to move water around the region in almost a kind of water grid kind of sort of format. Generally speaking, the northern part of our region is wetter than the kind of southeast of our region, so it allows us to kind of play tunes with where the water goes. So that is a significant piece of infrastructure delivery that we're going through at the moment. Now, I've been told that 52% of the route now, so the route goes from kind of Lincolnshire all the way down into Norfolk and Essex and Suffolk and Essex. 52% of the route has now been approved in terms of the planning approval that we need from local planning authorities. I'm pleased to say we've got all our approval from Lincolnshire local planning authorities. Across Greater Lincolnshire, I think we're just waiting on North Links to come back to us, but I think there's archaeology kind of challenges there which are being addressed at the moment. So 48 kilometres of pipe is now in the ground, and I suppose key thing for this committee, so there's a stretch of pipe from Lincoln to Grantham. That phase should be commissioned in the summer this year. So it's going in the ground now and should be fully kind of working by later this year. So good progress is being made. I think we'll pick this up at the next meeting, Chair. There's obviously alignment with the SPA pipeline and the potential for the new reservoirs as well. So, and that links to the whole kind of issue around the kind of drought debate that we were talking about earlier. So yes, there's some good progress being made, and I'll try and get colleagues to come along next time. I realise I do have one other update as well, which I forgot to mention, just on market raising. So we have actually, prior to the publication of Section 19, we've actually undertaken and completed some work in market raising already around Horseshoe Way. Yeah, so that work's complete, and we're now monitoring that. We've put some monitors in there to kind of understand how it functions a bit better. So we'll understand if we need to go back and do even a little bit more work or not, as the case may be. But that work is now complete now. So I should have mentioned that earlier, Councillor Bunny.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. So, yeah, if we could, we would appreciate a update with the SPA project. I think it's something that we all worry about, is the movement of water from the north to the south to look after difficult times, and to be updated would be greatly appreciated. I won't lose the opportunity from your address this morning, along with all members, that where riparian rights are concerned, very often our parish councillors are the eyes and the ears of what's actually going on in our parishes, and with live streaming it's good to have the opportunity of mentioning it. And again, isn't it just great, you know, there's 92 committees that go across the partnerships, and I know it's something we do refer to here, that this particular committee is a little bit different in its actions to the other scrutiny committees, that it is the liaison between the agencies and the partnerships, of which is the main conduit of what we're all here to do and hear of concerns and moving forward. So that is really informative. Okay, so moving to questions, I have 3 that I know of at the moment. So I'm going to be going to Gary Taylor, then I'm going to be going to, who am I going to next? Yeah, I've got you as number 3. I've got somebody before you. Oh, yes. I beg your pardon, Councillor Martin, then Councillor Baxter, and then Councillor Haigh. So, Gary, over to you first. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that update, Jonathan. Great to hear of this progress being made. So much information there to absorb. We've spoken about joint-up approach, working together, partnership working. Great to hear that's taking place. But can I just say a few words regarding communication strategy, where there does seem to be some gaps sometimes, where I believe there's room for improvement. For example, in Spalding, a major road, Park Road, closed for over a year, which led to many questions, such as would it ever reopen again, for example, were questions. So I do believe we do need information there to local residents, the media. Questions come up all the time on social media, and also the councillors, district and county. This would provide information. Chairman spoke about eyes and ears, and we can help provide that information, which help us work together that joint approach. So it would provide information, also manage expectations. So I believe we could learn a lesson and make some improvements there. It would help the communication, and it would go a long way, because as we know, when roads are closed, it can lead to disruption, pressure on other roads and infrastructure and services. So if we can work together on this, it would be an improvement. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I was aware of the Spalding issue for a while. So, so just one thing to add on that. So there's a few different, I suppose, conduits that you can get through to us to try and get that information. So you mentioned social media. So that's the usual way that obviously the customers can get in touch with us, or just call our contact centre, which is based just down the road. So we do also have a dedicated team for elected members. So if you do ever have any concerns or queries, either come directly to me or via Matthew. I can put you in touch with our with the team that works directly with our elected members across the whole of the region. They can keep you up to date with everything as we're going. So, and we often find that's a really effective way to help you, and then you can get that message out in a different way to the community that we might be able to. So, and we're very happy to support that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Martin?
Thank you. Can I welcome the number of projects there are in East Lindsey to look at the quality of water quality, and just say I would welcome further detail about how those projects are going to progress and timescales, etc., so I can pass that information on to colleagues back in East Lindsey. And also to say, I'm very sorry, I am going to have to leave, but I'll just wait for Jonathan to answer that point, please.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor Martin. Jonathan?
Yeah, Fiona, I'm sure we can bring a report for you, or do something sort of offline that just kind of outlines what we've done in this current investment period and what we're proposing to do. Clearly, the proposals are just proposals at the moment until we have the business plan approved by a regulator. We won't know, but I'm sure we can sort of split that and see what we're doing across East Lindsey. That should be fine.
Thank you. I gather we have waited some time for the regulator to approve the business plan?
So we are we're currently in what's called AMP7, so that's between 2020 and 2025, and we're building the business plan for 2025 to 2030 at the moment. So we don't get approval for that until December 2024. So, and then we start it in April 2025. So we don't have much time to know what's happening. But certainly on the water quality side, because it's such a hot topic at the moment, we are looking to do some early starts on that. So it will happen before April 2025 too. So, but I'll get you as much information as I can.
Thank you very much. So what you will be missing when you leave us will be the debate on the internal drainage board. So when you get the minutes, you'll know that's where you need to pick up. Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the promotional information about Anglian Water. It's no wonder that you're the #1 supplier of water and sewerage services in Lincolnshire. I'm pleased to hear about the fantastic working relationship with other partners. In light of that, I've got two questions. First of all, there's been a lot of concern recently in the news nationally and in Parliament about release of effluent into watercourses. And I note that last month, Anglian Water was fined a total of £560,000 after raw sewage discharge killed 5,000 fish in a Northamptonshire river. Can you please reassure us that every measure is being taken to prevent the illegal or even legal release of effluent into Lincolnshire rivers and waters, and that no such incident is possible in our county? My second question is about another recent press story concerning Anglian Water, which is that Anglian Water is responsible for the most Lincolnshire rogue signage fines, and it seems that this county council has fined Anglian Water more than anybody else because of rogue signage and overrunning highways works. What measures are you taking to clear that up?
Okay, so we've got two questions. One is the effluent that's going into the watercourse, as I understand it, and then concern over road signs. Jonathan, are you able to answer those for us, please?
I'll do my best. As a regional flood risk manager, it's not neither is my particular area of expertise, but certainly on road signs, I'll have to come back on that. That's just not something that I'm hugely aware of, but we do have teams that are dedicated to looking and working alongside your highways colleagues, so we can get back to you on that one. In terms of water quality, we take our responsibility for looking after the environment extremely seriously, and it's disappointing whenever we have to discharge sewage to the environment. It's not something that we want to do. Unfortunately, sometimes we have to do it because it protects people from flooding, and that's the whole reason for having storm overflows in the first place, is to stop people from flooding. And interestingly, you can't really talk about one without the other. So they're two sides of the same coin, really. So I think that there were calls to just block up all the storm overflows, but if we did that, then thousands of properties would flood. So we need to be very careful about how we do that and what we look at to do, and how we look at kind of managing that. Saying that, absolutely, we are committed to reducing the impact that any storm overflows have on the environment. So you may or may not have seen, but I can certainly circulate it afterwards to go in the minutes, are Get River Positive pledges. So we've teamed up with Severn Trent Water to get River Positive, and as part of that we have 5 pledges around improving the impact that our assets have on the environment. So I can certainly circulate a lot more detail on that after the meeting. I think needless to say, though, the investment that we are proposing, the investment that we're doing at the moment in this current 5-year period and the investment we're proposing over the next 5 years is really significant. As I mentioned earlier, we're already spending almost £1 billion this AMP on reducing our environmental impact from our water recycling assets. That number will be significantly bigger, I've no doubt, in the next AMP. And a big part of that will be I suppose, dealing with and managing the amount of surface water that finds its way into our sewer system. So often storm overflows are discharging because there's too much surface water that finds its way into the sewer, and then obviously we spill to the environment to prevent properties from flooding. So we want to reduce that from happening, and so we want to look at ways to manage that surface water to stop that. So one way of doing that is building a big concrete tank, for example, stick it underground, add a site, add a mine, thank you very much. Problem with that is, one, it's very expensive. Two, often we know that with a changing climate, it's not particularly a resilient form of infrastructure either, because in all likelihood that will get beaten again at some point in the future. So what we'll be looking to do is far more kind of surface water management measures. So I think I've spoken about it in the past, but wherever possible, take kind of retrofit green infrastructure approach to the urban environment to either slow the flow of water or reduce the flow of water finding its way to the sewers. So we've got some pretty bold plans. We can't do that ourselves either. We'll have to work alongside, particularly Matthew and your highways teams again, to make that work. But yes, we're doing all that we can to reduce our impact on the environment wherever possible, and we will continue to do that over the next kind of 5-10 years at least, if not more.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Brooks, point of information, was that?
Yes, I've got a point of information on the point that Councillor Baxter raised about the street works carried out by England Water. That is an item which is on the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee programme for May, and there's a whole item on street work and permitting, and also we are intending to invite Anglian Water along to that because of the number of incidents we have with Anglian Water. So that is going to be investigated through that. I just thought you'd like to know that, Councillor Baxter. Thank you.
I have passed that on to colleagues, I think, to come along. So hopefully they've been in touch.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Chiara is the person who would be dealing with that. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Baxter, could you turn your mic off for me?
Oh,
Thank you very much.
I beg your pardon, I thought you were going to come back to me.
Well, I can do, if you have anything else to come back
yeah,
on.
I was just going to say that I appreciate the comments that Mr Glesson, sorry, I can't read my glasses, has added. The fine in Northamptonshire was actually to do with, it seems to have been to do with a failure of electrical pumps and also a failure of a sort of alarm system. So it was a failure of a fail-safe as well as the failure of the equipment. So I'm glad to hear that lots of investment is going into hopefully preventing this happening anywhere else.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lucy Haigh.
Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, Andrew. Yeah.
That's all right. I'll change later.
No, I can see. Just change seats.
At the last meeting that we had, I asked Jonathan 3 questions. One of them was how many emergency sewer outfalls Anglian Water had stopped off in the last 5 years. The second question was the length of combined sewers that Anglian Water has separated into foul and surface water. And the last question was, were any of these floodplain sites west of Lincoln considered as the proposal for the new reservoir site, which is currently proposed around the Scrutiny area? Thank you, Chairman.
Jonathan?
Yeah, apologies, I didn't get back to you. Certainly on those first 2 points, I will take that back and we'll try and sort that out. Obviously, in terms of reservoir, we know what the preferred site now, so and we'll obviously cover that in more detail at the next meeting. But certainly in terms of CSO stopped off, that should be a relatively easy number to find. The length of combined sewer separated will likely be quite small, I would have thought, just because of the sheer disruption caused from taking that sort of approach. But I'll certainly see if I can find any information and I'll get back to you.
Okay, you want to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I suspect that the number of emergency sewer outfalls that have been stopped in the last 5 years in Lincolnshire is an extremely low number. And given that Anglian Water is now proposing £1 billion to spend on projects such as these, I would hope that they'll be brought more to the front, especially now that central government seems to be taking a stronger line for water companies to try and reduce that as much as possible. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We have the privilege of having the leader in our chamber today.
Thank you.
And
Thank
I
you.
understand he
Allowing
wants
me
to contribute.
To ask a question. Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I'll just follow up. I know it's going to be dealt with at the Highways Committee, but follow up on Councillor Baxter's point. There is a big issue with the damage, especially with these pipelines coming across the county on very narrow roads, and the damage is being done is substantial. I'm talking about my own patch, but I know it's elsewhere. So I would be interested to know, has money been set aside by Anglian Water to repair the damage, or is it a question that it has to go through highways? So I suppose it's a question for our team as well. The second point I would make is there is a massive issue about road closures and the way that Anglian Water would close a road for a whole week just to change a water meter. And again, they have different teams. I'm not really aware. I'm not sure you're operational. They have different teams doing every little job. So water meter will probably have 5 teams coming along to do the various stages, and the road will stay closed for the whole period. You know, and I've had in my village, I've had a road closed, in my view, unnecessarily, because they were still able to get by when people weren't working. It was closed for the whole week. And when I ask our team, well, why are we allowing this? I'm told, oh, it's Anglian Water using emergency procedures, which they can do. So I think there's, hopefully, I'm just warming you up so you can pass all this on, that hopefully there will be an honest conversation about all utilities, particularly Anglian Water, who bluntly are the worst at doing this, that how we can get to the stage where, yes, people have got to be protected when they're working there, but that doesn't mean to say the road has to be closed for such a long period. So I think there's a conversation there. And the final one is, again, in my patch, and I'm sure it's common across the whole county, there are lots of underwater systems which are partly county council, partly Anglian Water, and it is almost impossible to get everybody to, I mean, in an ideal world, you'd have a site meeting with all those who are responsible to say, well, there's a problem here, there's some localised flooding, what can we do together to sort this out? But that doesn't seem very easy at the moment. I'm not pointing any fingers, but again, I think there's an issue with, which are very distressing for people and quite annoying, that it's difficult to get to the bottom of who is responsible for the problem. It may be a connection or something else, and there seems to be a reluctance, bluntly, sometimes, for Anglian Water to share their knowledge of their system, or indeed share the camera work that they've done. And it would just be very helpful that we could, as local members, try and get people together to actually solve these problems collectively, rather than spend more time arguing about whose responsibility it is. I know the systems are, the legalities and the ownership is very complicated, but it is a constant frustration for me, and I'm sure from other members as well. That probably is not a few for the highways, but again, that's a joint. We all have that problem. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So I think I pick up 3 questions out of that. One is care and caution. Perhaps you'll give us some response on that to start with, Jonathan.
Yeah, certainly. So, thank you for, I suppose, warming me up, and I'll certainly pass it on to. I'll pass it on to my colleagues. I have no no knowledge or responsibility for what we do in terms of our highway works, but I think you picked up on some of the key points there. Certainly, one, if we are causing damage, what do we do to rectify that? And certainly, are we closing roads either for too long or unnecessarily or whatever it might be? Yes, health and safety has to be absolutely paramount for our workforce. Of course, it does. So, but equally, so there's a disruption that might cause to the wider community. So, I'll certainly pass those on. In terms of your third point around, I suppose, working together and site visits and so forth. So one, we are normally very happy to kind of come out and do that. So our operational teams are getting pretty good at this. So if there's any examples, please share, because I can pass that on back. But certainly, Matthew and I, we can talk on a regular basis, and if we need to give everyone a slight, nudge or kick up the backside to make sure they come on a site visit, then I'll certainly do that. So we also share all our mapping systems with the flood and water team. So and all of our kind of flood incident data as well. So all of that data is kind of freely available for the flood and water team. So so certainly, we're not certainly trying to hide anything or share stuff. We do also kind of share CCTV information with other authorities. So I don't know why we wouldn't share it here, unless it's, I know we don't have access to it or whatever it might be, or it might be a little. Sometimes we use what they're called look-see cameras, so they don't record it. You just literally look and see, and there's no recording of it. So it might be that, but. Yeah, look, we're always happy to work together. If there are any issues, either come directly to me or via Matthew, and I'm happy to try and sort that out.
Thank you.
Okay.
I've got three in my 3 villages, so I'll see the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. And I don't buy the safety of the workforce argument. If there's no workforce on site, there is no health and safety issue. And it's a question of, and it's a bug bite, and it's not just you. I think our own people, sometimes signs are left up because a different company does the signs, and frankly it's really annoying. And I know you have joint quarterly meetings, don't you, with all of us, in terms of when people leave the site, can they just take the signs, put them on the side of the road? It's common sense really, but no, they stay up there because it's somebody else's job, and the motorists are just expected to drive around it. But thank you for your support, and obviously I'll be seeing how it works in practice. Thank you.
And the third question that was in there, which is a piece of preparation, please, for the next Highway Scrutiny Committee, is on road closures. That's lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, I think we've had a fair debate on angling water. And it's really good, Jonathan, to have you here in person. Sometimes you're online. I don't know, there's just something about personal presence which is really, really appreciated. So, can I move that the committee has received a verbal update, I think we all have, and the presentation, and that we're satisfied with the progress and the updates and the commitments to enable members to that have come from debate. Lastly, can I request that from our comments today that they're captured and forwarded to the AW relative representatives with the timely reminder of highways. And can I ask if everybody's comfortable with the report and presentation, please, members? Yes, thank you. Are we all in favour? Sorry, I beg your pardon?
I'd like to dissent, Chair.
You'd like to dissent, okay. So I've got all in favour then. Okay, thank you. And any other dissenters other than Councillor Baxter? And one dissenter. Thank you very much indeed. So that is carried. It now gives me the privilege to move on to item 8, which is our internal drainage boards. And the reason for using the word privilege, whereby which I sit on 2 of the drainage boards that are within our county, our vice chairman is far more learned and knowledgeable on the internal drainage boards. And of course the thing that in particular really concerns all of us as councillors and particularly, I know we sit here as county members, but at districts, of course, is drainage boards levies and what they impact finally has on our members that we represent. So with that, over to you. Sorry.
If I might be permitted, Chair, within the presentation, would it be possible to explain why the Welland Internal Drainage Board is not included within the report? It is in Lincolnshire, and to what extent the details of the report equally apply to Welland's Internal Drainage Board? Thank you.
Well, I'm sure that the Vice Chairman will do that. I did actually represent the Welland Drainage Board at the last particular meeting. So over to you. Are you ready?
Thank you.
Can you address Councillor Baxter's point first, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, as we're aware, there isn't a presentation as such. We have simply the report as we have before us, and we have a couple of fantastic chief executives of drainage boards here to add their views. In addition to myself, I am familiar with numerous members around the Chamber who represent in different capacities on different drainage boards. So whilst Wellington the Deeping Drainage Board isn't necessarily represented here in terms of Chief Executive or in our paperwork, I don't think it detracts in any way from the broader points that are made, as this is an issue which affects to a greater or lesser extent every board and every district council, not just in Lincolnshire but across the country. And the reason that it's come to this committee today is that it affects the boards and district councils in Lincolnshire actually to a greater extent proportionately than those in other parts of the country. And as the chairman has rightly said, this is an issue that affects boards and our district colleagues, but we have a key role as the lead local flood authority to proactively manage and address the risk which arises from the issue set out in this report. One of the things that Lincolnshire does has recognised since 2007 and the establishment of the Lincolnshire Flood Risk and Water Management Partnership is that it is all our water. You know, flood risk issues, flooding water, it is a collective responsibility for Lincolnshire. And we're not going to get bogged down into it's not our problem, it's someone else's problem, because as we rightly know, when the water's coming up, we've all got a duty to do something about it. And that, as I say, has been recognised in Lincolnshire since 2007. We also see it running through the Greater Lincolnshire Riparian project that we've heard about today. And it's something I cover in different capacities, different organisations, and it sometimes feels that Lincolnshire does an awful lot of talking around this and other subjects, but compared to other parts of the country, other counties, other districts, that has to be a really good thing, that we are talking and managing these challenges constructively rather than arguing. So I think to address that risk issue, the risk to our drainage boards and the risk to our district councils, one of the greatest risks to our drainage boards is the challenge of setting balanced budgets, notwithstanding the cross pressures that we have in the current year, but setting those budgets without breaking the finances of a district council, because I don't imagine any board would ever want to be in the position of setting a rate that a council could not pay. And yet the legislation as it currently stands is that a drainage board may set the rate as it sees fit, and how that computes through into special levy is a charge to district level authorities or unitaries outside of this bit of Lincolnshire, that those councils have a legal obligation to pay. It isn't a charge that any council with a drainage board can refuse legally to pay. And that represents a massive risk to those councils, but like I say, it also represents a massive risk to boards that do their level best to manage and nurture that relationship with the councils, with the district councils that they cover. And it's important to bear in mind that this is an issue that arises through absolutely no fault of any district council or any drainage board. It is simply a misalignment of local government finance legislation and land drainage legislation that came about almost by oversight and accident. That drainage, I think so to understand the principle that underlies drainage rates, they are levied on the domestic property, the businesses and the agricultural land within a drainage district to draw down a small proportion annually of the value of that land, that property, those businesses, which is afforded the protection and the drainage by the board. And it's a very important principle, because it means it will always be far, 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 far more cost effective to pay a small rate annually than it would be not to do that drainage, because it recognises that without that drainage work having been done sometimes 200, 300 years ago, without that work being done and the maintenance carried out annually ever since, there wouldn't be farmland, there wouldn't be homes, there wouldn't be businesses, there would be effectively a wet wasteland. And in recognising that value and drawing down a part of it on an annual basis, that's what that's the principle that underpins drainage rates. And it's a very old-fashioned principle, but I believe it's an incredibly effective one. And if we were allowed to apply a similar principle, say, to coastal defences, where, and it doesn't matter whether it's coastal defences for a cliff that's falling into the sea or coastal defences at risk of overtopping or breach, if you are able to identify the value of the protection of the asset and draw down a small proportion of that on an annual basis towards its maintenance, what you end up with is the facility to fund a great deal more maintenance than ever you can simply making a business case to government or a central authority for a grant or for investment. So I think it's important to recognise where this starts and in terms of that principle. The effect in terms of district level authorities comes through that proportion of the drainage rate that is levied on domestic properties and is now collected as part of the council tax. Many years ago it used to be collected as a separate rate on those properties on which it was levied. At some point it was felt to be much more efficient that the council that was collecting its rate would collect the drainage rate and simply pass it on less a small administration charge. When council rates got wrapped up into council tax in its modern form, this translated into a special levy, a charge onto the council, which the council would rightly recover through the council tax. Fast forward over the following 20 or 30 years, and revenue support grant topped up and made good any increases that Drainage Board levied on district councils. Of course, that has gone. Up until 2012, it was possible for district level authorities to pass on any increase in drainage rates that it would need to in the form of increasing council tax. Since the referendum cap was introduced a decade or so ago, those councils no longer have that facility. And my apologies for being a little bit parochial in the figures that I'll use to illustrate this, but they're figures that I understand inside and out, and they apply in a to an extent to every council and every board in this country. So take, for example, East Lindsey District Council, that currently, in the current year, levies a precept of £156.59 on a Band D property, which will increase by the capped £4.95 to £161.64 in the coming year. This is an increase in revenue for that council from its increase in council tax of £337,722. The three boards which cover the East Lindsey District Council area, Witham Forth, Witham Third and Lindsey Marsh, combined the increases in special levy being charged to East Lindsey in the coming year is an additional £1,038,477. That leaves a gap in that one council's revenue budget of £701,755, which, like I say, it is obliged to pay, and it has no facility under the referendum cap to pass that charge on either onto council taxpayers. And based on the 2022-2023 figures, IDB special levies in East Lindsey currently account for 54.9% of the district council precept, and of that £156.59 collected annually from Band D properties, £85.96 goes to pay IDB special levy, leaving £70.62 to fund district council services. And in comparison, the average parish council precept in East Lindsey is £70, leaving that district council having to fund the services of a district council for, as I say, £70 a year. Contrasting that to parts of the country that don't have drainage board, North West Leicestershire is a good example. They are precepting £158.58 on a Band D property, and they have no drainage responsibilities at all. So that is a massive amount of money extra with which to deliver district council level services. And this isn't a competition. I appreciate I've given you what I think is the worst case example, which is East Lindsey. I know this affects South Holland and Boston to a similar degree. City of Lincoln is another useful example, where on £290 for a Band D property, 13% of that is taken in special levies. So this affects every council in Lincolnshire in a particular way, and some in an absolutely catastrophic way. But like I say, this isn't any criticism whatsoever of boards or district councils. It is simply the system and that relationship. Sorry.
Should we let them do their presentation?
As it comes together. And sorry. Yeah, so bearing in mind that the boards that we have got in Lincolnshire are among the most efficient public sector organisations of any kind that you're likely to come across in terms of overheads and operating and so on. They are fantastically efficient at what they do. I think I've probably gone on quite a while. I didn't realise that I wasn't supposed to be doing this. So I will I'm quite happy to bring in Andrew or Jane or anyone who would like to pick up, and I will carry on in a moment.
No, that's quite all right. The 5-minute rule was well out the window, wasn't it? Is it Jane? Are you going to?
Through you, Chairman. Yes, please. To
Thank
start
you very
with,
much. I think it's just one thing he missed out, and that is what is sitting on drainage boards myself as well. Is of course there's the utilities upward pressures, which are also adding to those very difficult circumstances, which we all recognise that all drainage boards are having to manage as well. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think really just to add a little bit of the background as to why we're at where we're at, and why we've had to, in many cases, raise the increase in the penny rate this year far more than I've known us have to do in the last 10 years. And many of you are familiar with the work of drainage boards. We do have this vibrant flood risk management partnership in Lincolnshire, long-standing, as has been said. But for those that aren't familiar with IDBs, our original primary purpose was around land drainage, and we have increasingly, since our origins back in the late 1700s, we've moved more into flood risk management and more recently water level management, managing in times of excess and also, as you've heard from other presenters today, in times of drought as well. So increasingly we find ourselves working with partners to manage for excess and for times of drought and to forward plan accordingly. Just to reassure Councillor Baxter, although Andrew and I are the ones joining the committee today, the Scrutiny Committee, we're talking really on behalf of our colleagues who know we're here in other parts from Lincolnshire, like Welland and Deeping, but also the 112 IDBs nationally. This is a national issue. It's not It's not pertinent to just the IDBs in Lincolnshire, but it is a national issue. And as has been said by the chairman, we do have across IDBs the same range of cost pressures that you have in other walks of public life. So rising fuel costs, pay costs, repairs and maintenance, all of those other things, service contracts for our excavators, heavy plant, we're finding all of that rising exponentially. But just to reassure you that just some calculations being parochial for a moment to the four Witham and Humber drainage boards I represent, we would have been able to contain our increase in the penny rate for this forthcoming year, 23-24, to in the range of 5.5% to 6.75%, which I don't think is a bad place to have been for managing and containing all of those other cost pressures, had it not been for the impact of electricity, which has meant certainly in my boards, 3 of them have had to set a penny rate increase of 15% in the pound, and 1 has had to set, that's Witham First, a 29% increase in the penny rate. Percentages, of course, can be alarming, because just to say to you what is 1% of income generation in one board is very different from in another, whether that be across the 4 I'm talking about, the 8 that Andrew and I talk about, or indeed the 112 nationally. So, you know, percentages, we need to understand it in cash terms as well as percentages. That just puts some metrics around it. But why are we in this position over electricity? And just to highlight there that it's the instability of energy markets internationally. From what we can understand through our procurement processes, and just to reassure members, we do procure using Eastern Shire's purchasing organisation and other, you know, all boards have different procurement arrangements, but we are all market testing and ensuring best value on what we do procure. So the 4 boards in Witham and Humber Group use the ESPO framework, which we are tied into until October 24. But that organisation acts on behalf of about 2,000 largely public sector bodies and forward purchasers, bundles of energy. We have had discussions with our energy providers about the instability in the market, which they can't tell us, but they estimate is likely to continue for at least another 18 months or so. What we have found is we've been caught in 2 ways. So energy affects us in terms of standing charges and also the unit rates. So just being parochial for my own group of 4 boards, we have 53 pumping stations. And again, that is precisely the same sort of situation that all my colleagues are in. Perversely, many of our colleagues who have business cases in to modernise the old diesel pumping stations in terms of part of our carbon reduction programme are now in a more fortunate position at the moment, because of course that is costing them less than we are seeing in the more modern electric pumping stations that we have. So we have 6 older diesel pumping stations, but it's our electricity driven pumping stations where we're seeing the big cost increase, and it's on 2 fronts. The unit price, where until the 30th of September 22 my boards were paying 12 pence per kilowatt hour. Usage varies a little bit by pumping station by a couple of pence, but as a rule of thumb, 12 pence per kilowatt hour. And from the 1st of October, that increased overnight to 30 pence per kilowatt hour, still well below the then market rate of about 70 pence per kilowatt hour, but we are tied into a contract at 30 pence per kilowatt hour, which is projected to increase to about 40 pence per kilowatt hour from the 1st of October 23. So in constructing the budgets for 23-24, we have to factor in what kind of year we're going to budget for, a dry, an average rainfall year or a heavy rainfall year. We couldn't, I don't think any boards that I'm aware of have forecast and budgeted for a heavy rainfall year like we had in 2019-20. That would be not affordable, and that we know would be unrealistic for our special levy paying councils and for our drainage rate payers in the district. But we've also had to factor in when our usage is, and based on historical analysis over the last 8 years or so, 80% of our pumped hours at our pumping stations is between November and March each year. So we've had to budget on the assumption of 40 pence per kilowatt hour for 80% of next financial year's pumping. That means a big increase for us, but before I sort of put the metrics around that one, I think probably the other one to just comment and make you aware of is what's happening with standing daily charges at pumping stations. So I'm sure, like all these things, with the best of sort of national intent, the Ofgem fair charging review was looking at getting a fairer distribution of fixed charges across the country, distribution and supply being the two elements that are picked up in the standing charges. IDB's pumping stations, it's a bit like the law of unintended consequences, have been caught up and caught the sort of tail end of that review. And that's where we've seen a big shift in our costs. I'm advised by our energy trader that the intent was to make sure that some of the larger warehouses that we see springing up and down the M1 corridor, alongside the railway lines, etc., would bear their fair share of the national distribution and transmission costs. But we and others have been caught in that review. The impact being for our four boards that across our 53 pumping stations, the standing charges which were running at between £13,000 and £14,000 a year have now gone up sharply and suddenly to £128,000 a year. That's before we switch a pump on, before we do anything to protect the land, residential properties, business properties and the critical infrastructure like, ironically, electric substations, roads, rail, etc., schools that are within the flood cell of each of the pumping stations. So we're paying that increased charge, £128,000, before we switch a pump on. We have explored options like diesel generator backup, disconnecting from the grid, and all the professional advice we've received is don't do it. There's absolutely no chance that when energy markets stabilise again, you'll be able to reconnect, distribution being such a national problem at the moment. There's no guarantee you'll be able to reconnect, and if we were to be able to reconnect some of those pumping stations, it would be very, very expensive indeed. So we've got this double whammy of increased standing charges and no end in sight for that one, and increased unit rates. Our hope is that the unit rates issue will stabilise over the next 18 months or so, and whilst they may never return to 12 pence per kilowatt hour, it may be more affordable. So we are hoping that what we're seeing is a hiatus in our costs for this temporary period, and that rings true, I think, for my colleagues up and down the country. So it's this issue of how on earth we manage the risk without none of us wanting to resort to those issues of taking decisions to switch off the pumps. But clearly IDB reserves are insufficient to be able to withstand more than what we have always budgeted for as our usual wet weather event at what up until this last year has been the usual costs. But with such a steep and sudden increase in energy costs, IDBs up and down the country are struggling to have sufficient in their reserves, even if we were to switch those earmark reserves from the very much needed capital programmes to update and refurbish our pumping stations, all the other things that we usually routinely do with our reserves, they would not be able to withstand the sort of autumn-winter that we had in 2019-20, and I think that is the risk. We're highlighting it today for IDBs because it's clearly pertinent, but when I talk to colleagues in Anglian Water, alongside Jonathan's team, you know, our colleagues in other flood risk management authorities are experiencing exactly the same sort of issue with these cost pressures. Clearly, the slightly different issue for IDBs is our scale as smaller public authorities, and the fact that, as Tom has highlighted, we passport on through the way that we, our two main sources of income are the drainage rates, which our occupiers of land in our drainage district pay, as has been explained, but then in each of our IDBs, various councils contribute through the special levies they pay, and they are our two prime sources of income. A lot has been happening, and we will cover that in more detail, and I'll hand over to Andrew. But this has been ADA, our Association of Drainage Authorities nationally, has been taking this issue up with MPs. Tom and others have been attending meetings with MPs. A letter has gone from ADA to Michael Gove as Secretary of State. And there is really, I think, good collaboration between the district councils and indeed for some of our boards, the unitaries in Greater Lincolnshire, to actually escalate this issue and to look at whether there are some solutions, including some capital to revenue transfers to hold a risk pool to try and manage this uncertainty for drainage boards over the next couple of years. But also, as Tom has highlighted, it does raise the wider issue about whether we need to pressurise and lobby in this country for water to become everybody's business and no longer the sort of public good that is paid for by those in lowland areas and those in more upland areas, perhaps not funding the burden and the responsibility of cost that in other parts of Europe we see happening, whereby water becomes everybody's business. So those are some of the issues, I think, in policy terms which it raises, but hopefully by setting out why we're at where we're at, it helps you to think what we might do about some of those issues and where you as members may be able to play your part in lobbying. But the specifics around East Lindsey and I know that have been raised, I think probably relate more to
okay, Jane, thank you very much. I think the other thing that is a considerable concern for all drainage boards, of course, is the pump maintenance programme and the capital replacement. And one of the things in sitting on two drainage boards that really scares me is the sort of default position that really, with such high energy costs and the other costs that you've got to endure at the moment, that one of the defaults is that this programme is set at nil for capital replacements and sort of crisis management of breakdowns. Thank you for making reference to the Welland Drainage Board. I know Karen Daft at the Chief Exec there, and I'll make sure that she's circulated into the dialogue of today. So we're going to hear the second part of the presentation from Andrew, and just so as members have got an idea of how we're going to manage this, I will then move into questions, and I've got three people that have indicated to speak when Andrew's made his presentation: Councillor Vaughan, Councillor Austin and Councillor Fleetwood. And then I'm going to ask my Vice Chairman to sum up, but in so doing, what we want to do and what we want to try and achieve from this morning's very needed, I'm sorry it's lengthy debate, but it's very, very poignant at this time, particularly with levies and council taxation and whatever, is to actually demonstrate as a recommendation to members of the ways that we think we could perhaps support the situation that the drainage boards are in, and he will do that by way of summing up. So if I can come back to you, Andrew, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Jane's covered many of the salient points already, so I won't labour on too much. I'm the CEO of the Water Management Consortium, and we have boards that run from Doncaster East across the Isle of Axholme, down through Retford and Laneham, all the way down through Newark to just underneath the belly of Nottingham at Ratcliffe and Soar Power Station. We also have the board that we're talking about today in some detail, the Vice Chairman has, and that's Lindsey Marsh Drainage Board, which sits entirely within East Lindsey District Council's area. You mentioned assets that now exist within board areas such as the A1, the East Coast Main Line, the M180, 5 power stations, an airport, and that's just in the group that I'm talking about, never mind all the other things that have grown into these areas, which are actually predominantly at or below sea level and therefore are artificial and have to be managed. If they weren't, if it wasn't for the work of the County Council, keeping the sea out along with the Environment Agency, or managing the Highland water carriers, which the EA do, combined with the IDB's work, these areas would either be permanently flooded or seasonally waterlogged. So life would not be as we know it in those areas. So turning just very quickly to the issue of raising what have we done about this? Well, we started back in August raising our concerns as some of the 94 pumping stations that we look after were beginning to come out of contract. And as Jane says, we were from a few pence, 17 pence, and at one point we were at £1.17 a kilowatt. So we sat in our hands and we looked at what to do, and we stuck with the variable rate until we managed to get prices from ESPO, which James mentioned, Woldmarsh and Torse, and eventually we've opted for ESPO because it was the best deal to bring the cost down. We had to make that decision in January so that we're able to budget for the year going ahead. We also engaged with the East Lindsey District Council, because that's the board of greatest interest from my group of boards for the Chamber today. And we spoke extensively with them to try and gain their support, because we are in this together and we need the support of each other to try and achieve things. I've met twice with Victoria Atkins. We've taken her out on the ground and shown her physically what we've been doing. We took her to Saltfleet pumping station, and there we're just about to get the pumps in from Holland. They're on their way now to be put in through the roof that we've taken off. And last year we set the civils contract there. We tendered for it with 5 different tenders, and the cheapest was twice the price of what we expected. So we were anticipating a cost of about £1.5 million, and the cheapest out of the 5 that we went out for came back at just over 3 million. And that's one pumping station. The coastal pumping stations were all built around the same time. So Saltfleet's first on the list, Trusthorpe's coming next, Andeby's after that, Inglemill's after that, Burrisluce, Gibraltar Point, Fullbeck, and there's 7 along the Louth Canal, which are all going to be refurbished over the next remaining 4 years of the 6-year programme. So it's a very, very busy programme for us at Lindsey Marsh Drainage Board, but it affects huge areas of East Lindsey District Council. I read from the website that 136,000 residents who live in the council area are split roughly between the coastal area, many of those pumping stations protect, and the higher regions of the Wolds and inland. So not to do anything is not really an option. And then the surges that we get in there in terms of economic benefit in the summer are quite considerable. So what we're doing is more than just draining land and farmland, which we shouldn't be shy about, because actually we can see, given the nature of world politics just now, it's absolutely essential to be able to feed an island nation. And along those the areas in Lincolnshire that are served by IDBs and the EA on the main arteries, it's a significant part of the country's prime agricultural industry. So we've also spoken to Andrew Percy, we've spoken to Brendan Clark-Smith, we've been in touch with Matt Warman. We've really tried to make a difference. We've virtually forced DEFRA to come out of London and meet us up in Doncaster. Jane and many other folks were there from all around Lincolnshire, the CEOs, to make our point that we needed some assistance because of the impact that this was having. The councils were being adversely impacted and disproportionately impacted because of these extortionate rises in electricity supply and standing charges. And we've seen the same sort of thing as Jane's experienced with the huge increase in standing charges with no change or explanation given other than what Jane's managed to find out. With regard to some figures for East Lindsey District Council, most of that £1 million really comes from Lindsey Marsh Drainage Board, because we are the largest single board in the country now, amalgamated out of 3 boards into one. And when you look at the electrical costs for last year, they were about £338,000. And this year, they're anticipated to be £682,000. And if we have a wet year like 2019 and 2020, you can add on £500,000 on top of that straight off. And not to have the money is quite a risk to be taking with all those areas and those populations that I mentioned. We don't have access to the Public Works Loan Board other than for refurbishing capital assets. We cannot borrow money apart from to do that work. We do not have a direct access to the Belwyn fund. We have to wait until the district council actually initiates a Belwyn claim, and then we can submit some of our costs for that, but we only get a proportion of those back. And when we saw the last flood in 1920 up in the Isle of Axholme, North Lincolnshire Council didn't actually submit a Belwyn claim, and therefore the board used its reserves in order to be able to cope with the floodwaters. And therefore it really adversely impacted what we had available to us. So we have really tried to make a difference. We are very much hand in glove with the district councils. We have raised this to DEFRA, we've spoken to MPs. We need your support too to take this on beyond this. We've had one response which I picked up this morning, which came in through Bassetlaw District Council to us, and it's from Rebecca Pow, and I'll circulate that around on email to you, but it doesn't give us any silver bullets, and really just says they're raising the issue, or government's raising the issue with Ofgem on our behalf to try and look into the unfair practice of charging and the standing charges. So we have no answers other than we're in a very difficult position, and we feel very strongly that we feel it's unfair for the local population to have to withstand this on their own, given the current circumstances. And we have tried our utmost as a united group, every single chief executive, to make a difference.
Thank you very much for that. I think I'll say the word. The situation is unattainable that you're having to represent at the moment, and indeed I think lots of us that do sit on drainage boards also know that those that do have capital reserve balances of whatever amounts they are in jeopardy of being completely wiped out within 1 year, quite probably. And I think that needs to be demonstrated to national government that they can't rely on that as a way to actually move on with the situation as it is. I've got three councillors wishing to speak. Now four. Councillor Vaughan is first and been waiting very patiently, so over to you, Councillor Vaughan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a member of three boards. I know you say you're a member of two, Upper Witham first and Witham third. And it's past the first. I've been on drainage boards for about 20 odd years, and I think it's the first time I've agreed with your Vice Chair, Tom, what he said today. Yeah, well done, Tom. And also, I know Jane, she's my boss on the drainage boards. I know she'd been at her wit's end writing to everybody, and numerous people are trying to help us out. Now, I've got sort of two hats on. When I'm on the drainage board, I've got to get a budget balance for all three boards. And then I go to the City Council and I'm on the budget review there. And our budget this year, we give City Council, give the drainage board, the three drainage boards I'm on, we give nearly £1 million and £500,000. Now, to my best of my knowledge, at one time we used to get all that back from central government. But it disappeared percentage, so we don't get nothing back now. And we collect, in this city, we collect all the rates and give them to the county council, but we only receive about 6% of it, keep 6%, we give all the rest of it to you. So it's our ratepayers I'm more worried about. And the other part is, the ratepayers don't know we paid the drainage board, we can't put it on the bills. All we can do is the main drainage rates, the police or whatever, we can't put drainage board the bit on the bill. So the ratepayers in this city don't know how much they're paying for the drainage. And if you want for the drainage boards anyway, we'd be flooded, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, thanks for everybody concerned. I hope we are way out of it as quickly as possible. I don't know way to do it is to pressurise this government. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I share your sentiments and concerns, and also in the way that the council tax billing system works. It now does an apportionment for police and for fire and whatever. If it was the last way of actually perhaps funding the dilemma that we've got to address, then maybe it would be to have a water levy, but I think we'd be much better if the government would be sensible to really acknowledge the predicament, and that's what it is, that the likes and the professionalism of people like Jane are trying to, you know, shore up and manage. And the word unattainable is exactly the right word to actually use. We'll see that we give our support. Waiting very patiently, Councillor Austin.
Thank you. I don't sit on the drainage board actually, but probably 1950 or thereabouts, I should think, maybe earlier, the word black sluice I would hear mentioned quite regularly, living just south of Boston. Right, I could probably summarise Councillor Ashton's comments very quickly. The biggest risk, really, in some respects, I mean, yes, drainage boards, they are so important, and perhaps we should be looking for best practice of funding drainage from elsewhere in Europe, but it's of course a pity that we ever left the EU in the first place. I'll get that comment made. Right, but the biggest risk really regarding the amount of our council tax that has to go to the drainage board is in what those councils cannot do for their residents as a result. Nothing more than that. We can't do all sorts of provide services that I think we were hearing on the radio the other night as we were driving. My husband made that comment. Well, if we didn't have the drainage rates to pay, well, we could do that for our, you know, for our residents. But drainage comes first because it's our protection, it's our livelihoods. I mean, we feed the nation, we've got to drain the land. So, yes, please lobby everyone appropriate, because it's what we can't do as districts that is so upsetting.
Yeah, I pick up the sentiments, Councillor Austin, entirely, and I know this meeting's going to go past the 3-hour mark very shortly, so I will be having to propose an extension of, say, 30 minutes very shortly. But what is necessary is, Councillor Austin, is that the remarks that you make are actually endorsed in what we're going to make as a representation. And I think the time is well spent today in making sure that the representation and the support we give our drainage boards is as much as we humanely and possibly can between the abilities of us all. Councillor Fleetwood, please.
I take your comments with regard to the fact that I assume you want me to be brief. I'm not going to be, I don't know if I'm going to be brief or not. I've been a member of, I'm here as a district councillor today, not as a county councillor. I've been on drainage boards now for 25 years. Witham Third is an example, which I'm still a member of. Newark and Sherwood, well, where's Newark and Sherwood? It actually just laps up to the side of Nottingham, West Bridgeford, so it's a long, long way over. Scunthorpe and Gainsborough Water Management Board takes into account water down as far as Lee, well into Lincolnshire and beyond. And I do know the 2 drainage boards I'm currently involved in have had severe financial pressures, certainly because of energy, certainly because of the ongoing costs. I hear through the various limbs and the various organisations, though, that effectively a lot of these drainage boards do not have vast amounts of liquid assets. So indeed, if we do see the liquid asset coming out of the sky, and April showers are only just round the corner, if we do see 1 or 2 major events coming down and water coming out of the sky, effectively that will be enough to bankrupt some of the drainage boards in the area. They will not be able to continue. We talk in terms of lobbying government, and yes, potentially government is the right place to get assistance from, but it's the partners. We've all been talking about whose water is it. Well, in reality, it's everybody's water. And so, you know, we can talk to DEFRA, we can talk to the Environment Agency, but I think that there needs to be something a little bit more immediate, a bit here and now. And I think that what we should be doing is trying to call upon either Environment Agency, dare I suggest the County Council, as being there to pledge to underwrite a drainage board in the area, so that if indeed they were to receive a major event, they would be able to provide some level of assistance. I don't know if it would be the entire cost of a flood event or not, but to provide the assistance to protect the people who live in Lincolnshire, the people whose carpets we try and look after. I know I've talked in terms of birds earlier, but it's carpets that count, and certainly that's the case in the Environment Agency. When we look at all of these numbers, those are the important factors. So I think that County Council and potentially Environment Agency and DEFRA should be looking to support the drainage boards across Lincolnshire in the short term.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got 3 points out of that, Councillor Fleetwood, so we'll come to those in a minute. Councillor Baxter?
Thank you. I don't have many years' experience on drainage boards. I've never been on one, not for want of trying. So forgive me if I'm technically out, but I would assume that the drainage board electrical requirements consist of some kind of heavy demand for electricity to pump a lot of water in a hurry, but also some baseline electrical use to pump water gradually kind of all the time. And I think originally, before the internal combustion engine came along, a lot of that pumping was done through renewable energy in the form of windmills. I wonder, do internal drainage boards do any of them use any renewable energy in the form of solar or wind? Has it been investigated? Because it would seem to me quite a useful way of meeting some of the base load energy requirement. And there would certainly, I would guess, be some either buildings or land where you could inoffensively put some renewable energy systems.
Okay, so I think there's a question there about renewables, which I will suggest in a minute. I think the other thing is in the cost of water pumping, it is the startup of the pumps at the very beginning that uses that great surge of electric that actually really accentuates the cost. And I know one of the other things that drainage boards have been doing over the last year is actually to examine the level of water at what height it is before they actually turn these pumps on. And I know at one particular drainage board we've actually been looking to, well, agree to actually hire it a little bit so as the pumps don't come on quite so soon. I mean, just all sorts of ways of trying to look after the budgets, which are, you know, as we've heard, in a very, very difficult place. So, Jane, Andrew, something on renewables for us?
I think the best we can offer you at the moment is an assurance that we do procure green electricity. That's as far as we can go at the moment. We're using different pump regimes, as the chairman's mentioned, so and we always pump wherever we can between midnight and 7 a.m. And then we do additional pumping as water levels require it. But to be honest, at the moment, there's very little difference in cost between the unit rates for nighttime use and daytime use. It was until 1st of October last year quite a differential pricing for us, but now it isn't really, it makes very little difference. But we do, for all sorts of reasons, including not putting pressure on the grid, etc., we do keep to a pump regime of midnight to 7 a.m. as most boards do. We have looked, you're absolutely right, is there anything else we can do in terms of using alternative energy sources? Our pumping stations at the moment, which many of them are coming to the end of their design life, and we are, in many cases, we have capital programmes where we're through the RFCC, we are asking for and submitting business cases with some success for the refurbishment of those pumping stations. So there is an ongoing programme, just to reassure you of that, but that's like for like reprovision. That's not going to take us into whatever the next form of new energy will be, whether that's hydrogen power, whatever. The very basic assessment we've had done, and we did get in a firm of engineers from, I can't remember if it's Norfolk or Suffolk, who came in and assessed one or two of our pumping stations to look at alternative ways of measuring them in the short term through this energy crisis of a couple of years. And really, there's nothing immediate that we can do in terms of wind power or solar power, has also been suggested. The best we could do is look at using some of our land, some of our roofs, etc., to get some benefit in terms of feed-in tariff. But to answer your question, at the moment, with the technologies that are available, we don't have an alternative to be able to actually fire up and run the pumps at times when we need to move vast quantities of water. That's probably the best answer I can give you at the moment, but I'm sure we could give you a more detailed answer. But probably in terms of the technology levels we're at the moment, no, we are wedded to the electric pumps we've got. The advice we've had about turning them off and disconnecting is don't do it. There is no viable alternatives for us at the moment, and our diesel pumps are used as backup, but they are entirely that. They were, in many cases, in the early 1990s, replaced by modern electrics that have greater capacity. So our diesels, certainly in our four boards, are backup capacity to help manage levels in times of excess, but they can't be relied upon as alternatives.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So I need to rely on members at this point, just before bringing Andrew back in, to suspend standing orders and to propose that we extend the meeting for a further 30 minutes. I'm hoping in that time we'll be able to address what Andrew's got to say, make a recommendation for the chair. Thank you both very much for attending. And to manage 5 minutes at, say, just gone 20 past for the forward programme, which shouldn't take too much in summing up. So I'll propose that we extend the meeting for 5, and the Vice Chairman will second. Are we all in favour? Thank you. Any dissenters? No? Lovely. Thank you. Right, Andrew, over to you then, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just very quickly, the pumping station is only one part of the system, though, because we also have the channel. And the channels are used to store water until such times as we can evacuate it by gravity. And when we're putting in the new pumping stations all down the coast, the thing we're making certain is that we've made the maximum use of gravity discharge so that we can resist putting the pumps on till we really need to manage the water table. And as things develop with regard to the changes in climate that we have, it's been spoken about earlier in the meeting, we're going to have to look at being able to use some of that water in different ways or store it in different places rather than just continually evacuate it out to sea. The trick is getting the balance between protection of assets and people and property and then storing the water and being able to have it in the right place to use it for irrigation or what have you in the future, or even drinking if it's suitable.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, Vice Chairman, I'm not going to put the clock on 5 minutes, but I hope you've got a concise action plan, and then I can call upon members to see if they will endorse the action going forward and get to some measure, I hope, a huge measure of support for the situations that the drainage boards are having to undertake. Vice Chairman.
Thank you very much, and I can assure you that I won't speak as long as I did on trying to introduce this subject. I think it's very interesting, very useful comment from around the chamber that I'm sure can be factored in to what we're about to suggest. In having dealt with the problem, I think it's essential that we address the potential solutions. And as we've already heard, there's an awful lot of lobbying already taking place, and I'm really, really pleased to see that between local councils, the Association of Drainage Authorities, our boards, our MPs, there has been a huge amount of work getting this into the Secretary of State, Michael Gove's ministerial statement. This is on the radar of government, this issue, for the first time in a way that it hasn't been for the last decade in which we have known that it is an issue. It's only in this year that the figures have blown it completely to the level that it has. In terms of solutions, I would like to suggest that we as a committee and ourselves as a council, as a lead local flood authority, picking up on the comments that have been made, write to DEFRA, the Department of Energy and Climate Change, and also to Ofgem, picking up on the very specific challenges raised by standing charges and electricity costs in terms of boards and pumping. That for boards, that is the single biggest driver of these charges, of these costs. It must be borne in mind that the total cost of special levy across the whole country is only £40 million. This is small money for government. Appreciating that government hasn't got many spare 40 millions, I would suggest that we as a committee and as a lead local flood authority write to the Department for Levelling Up Communities and Local Government in support of the lobbying efforts that have already been engaged with that department by district colleagues, boards and ADA in respect of soliciting a Section 31 grant from government to support those councils and those costs. And also that consideration is given to varying the referendum cap that is currently imposed on those authorities with special levy contribution to pay, to give an additional facility under that referendum cap in the same way as already exists for this council in respect of adult social care levy, and exists on an annual basis the variation for the Police and Crime Commissioner council tax referendum cap, on a case-by-case, on an annual, on a needs basis, recognising again the vice in which those authorities find themselves squeezed at the moment between a charge that they have to pay and a referendum cap that prevents it being passed on anywhere else. And I say this respecting that there is absolutely no one who would wish to see council tax increase unnecessarily. But in terms of the overall council tax, in Lincolnshire, if you take what I think, give or take currently, a £1,950 bill, depending on which district you're in, for a bandy council tax, actually £20 would solve this problem. All of the additional levy in the current year that being charged onto district councils, £20 additional facility under a referendum cap, would solve all of these problems and mean that council could fund all of these increases in their current year. And like I say, no one wishes to see council tax go up, but in terms of the overall council tax bill, it is a relatively small amount. And I would say as a councillor that I would be more than happy to justify to any of my residents every single penny that Drainage Board spend on their behalf in keeping their feet dry, in protecting their property, in protecting their businesses and their farmland. And it is worth bearing in mind that the agricultural ratepayers do pay, it depends on the board, some boards it's equivalent of 50%, equal to that which the councils pay. And if you're a farmer looking at this, then you may have an extra couple of £1,000 bill to pay, but that's not a lot of wheat or barley if your field goes underwater. And also in that, whilst the longer term aspiration probably should be the disaggregation of Drainage Board funding and council tax, I would say just be careful what you wish for. If Treasury ever got its mitts on this issue and got its mitts on this money, what they would want boards and local councils to do as a consequence. I think that there is a value in having the principle that it is local funding for a local solution, but I think there does have to be a better way of doing it than what we've got. So, Mr. Chairman, just to sum up, encapsulate what I just said, letter to DEFRA and DECC and Ofgem in respect of electricity charges, and a letter to DLUC in respect of supporting the request for funding through a Section 31 grant, or a variation in the referendum cap for those authorities with special levy to pay, or a variation of those two, as ever government might see fit. Thank you.
Okay, so to add to those, we've got the representation to the Department of Levelling Up, because if ever there's a case of that, here it is. So I think that needs to be added to it. I think I'll take advice from our Drainage Board representatives as to where they are, because you've mentioned it also about the annual need case by case, because I think, to me, I think with the severity of this problem, that really comes to me as phase 2 rather than immediately as phase 1. And I think what we all need to do as councillors and as politician representatives, and indeed we perhaps ought to do through our leader as well, is to try and do our level best to see that the 7 MPs that represent Lincoln County Council actually all do their part in supporting this particular plight. Now that is much easier said than done, because we know from highways, we know from health situations that it has been very difficult to get all 7 of them to actually discuss, participate and support our need. But if anything could go on record from me today as the chairman, more greater than those, is if this doesn't happen, and if our drainage boards do become insolvent, then in such a very sad one word, we will be sunk. And I really think that this is really, really serious. I'm not so sure, despite what best efforts our drainage board chief executives have done, that and I understand that Michael Gove is got sort of a borderline level of commitment at the moment, but for goodness sake, this really, really needs dealing with, and we need to do it from today. So I would like to ask that committee members endorse where we are with the drainage board's predicament. That I think we have debated it fully where DEFRA is concerned, the drainage boards are concerned. I've mentioned local MPs, and yes, all 7 of them, and this isn't political at this point, we need help with drainage. ADA and, of course, the joint district councils. But, you know, with the district councillors' hat on, above everything else in taxation, really, this part of this levy that's needed to be found is really a national taxation point. It is not necessarily into our districts. And as has been alluded to this morning, is the fact that water belongs to all of us, or in essence, if it doesn't, it belongs to none of us. And man can't live without water. Our area, as has been alluded to by Councillor Austin, you know, we are in the major area of agriculture and providing the bread basket, the fruit and the vegetables, and some of the 5-a-day essentials that we should all eat very much here. And we really need our MPs to levy with Michael Gove and really step up to the plate. I know I have a MP's reselection meeting, I think it's next week. You can guess what my number one topic will be. So, enough said. Do I have member support and agreement, can I ask? Is that unanimous? It looks as it is. I'm really grateful for that. I hope we sent the best possible message home with you, good people. I'd like to take this opportunity in particularly thanking both of you and indeed the other chief executives of the drainage boards, because the ones that I sit on, I know just what a really, really difficult job you've got at the moment. Please keep doing it. We'll do our best to support you in the way that it moves forward, and thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 9, Kiara, it is the work programme. We've mentioned what we're going to be doing in the workshop, and indeed, can I ask when's the next flood and water scheduled meeting after the workshop? I think we've got one in May, haven't we?
It's the 15th of May.
17th of May.
15th.
Sorry? 15th of May. I think that'll be after full council, will it? I think it was last time. I think it is, isn't it? However, yes,
Chair, just while you're checking, did someone mention a workshop earlier on, and are we all invited to that, and when is it?
Everybody, all members are invited to it. It's on April the 26th. It is here, and I'll see that you're reminded of the itinerary, Councillor Baxter. Yes, Councillor Bunny.
According to my diary, it's before the next council. The council's on the Friday, we're on the Monday.
It's on the Friday and we're on the Monday. That's how it was last year.
No, yes.
Yeah. Councillor Austin?
Chairman, all right, I will still be a county councillor, but I won't necessarily be a borough councillor, because I think the local elections for
I
the
am very
district,
mindful that there are several of us in this room.
People here might not necessarily be here in their district capacity, you see. So,
right. Well, the best thing I can do about that is I can offer my earnest support to our officers that today's minutes are not just accurate, but that we are very careful about the action points in them. And I'll ask our Vice Chairman to make sure that he assists me in doing that, so that for district councillors, if they are not here to represent at the next meeting, their successors will have a concise and the most understandable way forward in which to practice. I know, talking from my own experience, having been a district councillor for nearly 8 years, and a county councillor for the best part of 7, it's pretty steep learning curve if you are newly elected. So we really need to make sure that we are as concise as possible. And there's no reason with some of these particular issues, particularly around the drainage board issues, that we shouldn't offer some counselling to new elected if they are different from the present ones. And with that, I shall close the meeting, I think. Are you comfortable with that, Kyra? Is there anything further you want to say on the work programme? I've sort of stolen your thunder, I apologise.
No problem at all, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to remind members that following this meeting, I'm now building the agendas for the future meetings up until the end of the year. So if you've got any items that you wish to be included in future work programmes, please do liaise with me offline. Thank you.
Okay, so one of the things I think we'll make as a standing item, which is of paramount importance, is the internal drainage boards and what's happening there. There are others, but that is absolutely paramount. Vice Chairman?
Thank you. Something I think I mentioned last time I was here and just wondered how far it had got was perhaps inviting the promoters of the Centreport project with the WASH to come and speak to us. Please.
Okay, well, with that to do, I'll close the meeting at 13:17. Thank you all most sincerely, honestly. I think today's been a big meeting and we've had a lot to achieve in it. Councillor Austin?
Please, do you think our democratic services or somebody could really pressurise the various our external bodies that write reports, that they arrive in time so that we don't have page 1 of that report, page 1 of that report.
Yes.
It was chaos. It really was.
I will revoke that it was chaos, but what I will do as the current chairman is that the chairman has a briefing 2 weeks before, okay? We were assured that these reports were to follow and presentations were to follow, and I do accept that there has been a default on probably 2 of those. What I will ask at the next briefing, and I'm sure it's undertaken now, is that the situation allows for more digestion because that's what makes for a full contribution of all members. So with that, I'll say good afternoon to you all. Thank you.